3 hours of real World War II battle stories compiled from our most powerful videos. At the start of this journey, we'll uncover many forgotten aspects of the war and shed light on the history that time tried to bury. We arrived south of Caen in early July, our division finally assembled under the thick canopy of the Singles woods. It was a strange contrast. Idyllic countryside and ancient trees shadowing the iron beasts we were tasked with operating. The panzers were hidden, dug in like sleeping monsters, their engines silent, waiting for the signal. By July 6th, the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment had positioned itself around the villages of Bretteville-le-Rabais, Quesnay, Ouilly-le-Tasson, and Tasseley, all straddling the Caen-Falaise road. I still remember how sudden it all began. On June 28th, Albert Frey led the 1st Regiment toward Venoix, just west of Caen. At midday, they moved out toward Mons, aiming to cut off British forces who'd already crossed the Odon near Tourville. Despite fierce resistance, they pushed through to Verson and Mons. I wasn't with them that day, but word of the British counterattacks that followed reached us almost instantly. By the next morning, Frey's men had dug into defensive positions at Verson, Eteville and Malteau, bracing for the storm that was surely coming. July 7th, I'll never forget it. Caen was being torn apart by a brutal Allied bombing campaign. The noise was relentless. The very earth seemed to groan beneath us. You couldn't hear your own voice. Every heartbeat felt like it echoed with the sound of distant artillery. We were still in reserve then, my battalion of armoured personnel carriers stationed further south near Saint-André-sur-Orne. To our surprise, command of our battalion had changed hands. SS Captain Joseph Diefenthal had taken over. He was Theodore Wisch's former adjutant and hadn't served with us before. Still, orders were orders, and we followed them without question. Our strength was limited. When we pushed toward the front, several of our mortar and tank gun platoons were still waiting behind for their vehicles. The only operational unit at the front was the Pioneer platoon under SS Senior Sergeant Hafestro. I myself waited in an old chateau at Chaise-Dieu for the rest of our 7.5cm gun-armed APCs to arrive. It felt like we were playing catch-up with the war. When the 6 vehicles finally arrived in early July, I was given command of 2 APCs as section leader in the tank gun platoon. Our commander, SS 2nd Lieutenant Bergmann, and his 2nd Corporal Feldvoss, immediately began training us. We had no radios in the new APCs. Only Bergmann had one in his command vehicle. Everything else was done by runners and hand signals. That kind of silence on the battlefield, terrifying. On the 22nd of July, I turned 22. We were already packing up for the front, the mortar and tank gun platoons, leaving in the dark of night. We reached the front lines, without incident, but the sky above us glowed with distant fire. It was impossible not to reflect. Just a year earlier, I'd been on the Russian steppe at Kursk. Now I was 3,000 kilometers west, face to face with the full weight of the Anglo-American invasion. It was like defending Germany in a great burning circle, from the east, the south, and now the west. The front at Caen was ablaze. One of our men, Traugott Schmidt from the 1st Regiment, sent a letter home that captured the chaos perfectly. He wrote of a 6-hour British artillery barrage, the sky gone black with smoke, the earth trembling. Then, thinking we were all dead, the Tommies advanced, only to be met with fierce close-quarters combat that threw them back in pieces. He described us pursuing them straight into hell, fighting without sleep, living in a place that was mentioned daily in the Wehrmacht communiqué. "We are 1st Regiment Leibstandarte," he wrote. "Either we win or we die for the fatherland." By the 11th of July, our division had taken over the southern Caen-Falaise sector from the exhausted Hitlerjugend, who had fought non-stop since June 7th. But with every metre gained, we paid in blood. At Saint-André-sur-Orne, we lost SS 2nd Lieutenant Albert Bauer and 3 men in action. Another 12 were wounded, including SS Lieutenant Hans Schmidt. The next day, 2 more men died. One of them, Lieutenant Fritz Bocker, had led 1st Platoon in No. 10 Company. 7 more were wounded. The attacks never ceased. On July 13th, Allied fighter bombers harassed us with bombs and strafing runs. The mortar fire and MG bursts came like clockwork. 2 days later, we shifted to new positions along the N158 highway, north to south, straight and unforgiving between Caen and Falaise. Elements of our Panzer Regiment moved east. We stayed put for now, digging in, holding ground inch by inch. No. 10 Company was sent to Percoville, I still remember hearing the news. SS Grenadier Helmut Hoffmann of our pioneer platoon had fallen on July 18th. It hit us hard. We had trained together, laughed together. Then there were the stories that made you shake your head and grin at the absurdity of it all. Like when a runner showed up to fetch SS Corporal Rudi Knobloch before a night assault. He had over 50 close combat days to his name, and command had decided it was time for rest. He reported in, was given a leave pass, and disappeared from the front. Even getting to the regimental rest home at Steinach wasn't easy. At Innsbruck station, the field police tried to arrest him, suspicious of his story. He had to convince them his leave was real. Others weren't so lucky. SS Corporal Karl Menner, one of our mortar group veterans, was wounded, but later he went on to lead the reconnaissance platoon of Regiment Denmark in the Nordland Division and earned his second Iron Cross First Class, one from Leibstandarte, the other from Nordland. He even had the close combat clasp in gold. That was rare. You didn't get that unless you were always in the thick of it. In the end, the memories of Normandy blurred with the dust and blood of every other front. The faces of the fallen, the churned fields, the glow of burning villages, and the endless rumble of artillery. It was just another chapter in the war for us, but it was where many of us would leave a part of ourselves behind, buried under hedgerows, beneath cratered roads, or in the ruins of a farmhouse we'd never return to. On February 20th, 1943, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3, along with the 4th Heavy Panzer Company, departed from Poltava and headed toward Karlovka. The journey took place under extreme winter conditions, with roads covered in ice. Due to the treacherous terrain, 6 tanks slid off the road, including the command tank of SS Hauptsturmführer Meyerdress, which crashed into a roadside ditch. Additionally, a truck from the 4th Heavy Panzer Company overturned but was successfully recovered and towed back to Poltava for repairs. By the end of the night, 13 tanks had sustained damage. The battalion arrived in Karlovka early in the morning on February 22nd. The next objective was to regroup north of Peresh. By the evening, Pereshchapino was secured. However, the 4th Heavy Panzer Company loss. This was a relief for the crew, as the tank only required extensive repairs. It was later transported to Dnipropetrovsk for full-scale restoration. The workshop platoon viewed this as a significant achievement, marking their first large-scale recovery operation. During the night of February 22nd to 23rd, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 regrouped south of Pereshchapino and continued its advance in a southern direction toward Verbeke. On February 23rd, the battalion halted briefly to receive a new allocation of fuel and ammunition before proceeding with 3rd Company leading the formation. On February 24th, the village of Vyazovok was attacked and secured by 0930 hours. During the battle, 2 Soviet anti-tank guns were destroyed. Though the battalion lost 1 Panzer III, the unit then regrouped north of the road leading from Popasna to Pavlograd. On the night of February 24th to 25th, the battalion's light supply column reported combat activity near the village of Nagashtovka, where the unit had set up camp near Kochereshki. Between February 25th and 26th, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 engaged in heavy combat in the Zaradorovka and Strasnoye areas. The battle on February 26th was particularly intense due to severe weather conditions. By February 27th, the battalion successfully captured Zaradorovka and regrouped along the railway line near Sakharivka. During the advance, a Panzer III from 2nd Company was rendered inoperative due to a damaged fuel pump. SS Obersturmbannführer Rinner was reassigned to the staff company of SS Panzer Regiment 3 as the new regimental adjutant. However, he was later killed on March 21st, 1943. Following his reassignment, SS Obersturmbannführer Schroeder from the staff company of 2nd Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3, assumed command of Rinner's platoon, while SS Untersturmführer Kohler remained in charge of the half platoon. On February 28th, SS Panzer Regiment 3 regrouped along the main road leading from Panyutain. By the last day of February 1943, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 had 13 panzer tanks undergoing repairs. On the final day of February 1943, the workshop platoon from the 4th Heavy Panzer Company was stationed in Orelka. The unit's vehicles could only operate during the morning hours since the afternoons were dedicated to recovering bogged-down vehicles stuck in the thick mud. Along the main road, stranded trucks awaited recovery approximately every 100 meters. Some of these vehicles had already been destroyed. The company column extended over a kilometre, struggling to maintain unit cohesion throughout the march. In Orelka, a 7-man work detail was assigned to recover a Mercedes truck that had become trapped in the mud while carrying a Tiger tank engine. Fortunately, a nearby truck equipped with a mounted crane facilitated the recovery effort. Most of the workshop platoon remained stationed in Orelka, supporting vehicle maintenance and recovery operations. At the end of February 1943, Gunther Trauper, a member of the 6th Company of the 2nd Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3, recalled an incident. The regimental adjutant, SS Obersturmbannführer Rinner, approached us and said he would send a Tiger tank to tow our disabled Panzer III. However, we had to wait because nearby engineers had considered blowing up our tank. We waited for some time, but no Tiger tank arrived. Meanwhile, our radio operator reported the sound of an approaching engine. Instead of a Tiger, a Panzer IV arrived and successfully towed us away. Between March 1st and 2nd, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 engaged in combat in Ulyanovka and the Yefremovka region. On March 2nd, a fresh allocation of Tiger tank engines arrived for the SS Panzer Corps, ensuring that the heavy tanks could continue operations. By March 3, 1943, the workshop platoon had spent 4 days in Nizhny Orel, performing engine inspections on both Tiger tanks and Panzer III tanks. Many of the vehicles were showing signs of wear, particularly in their running gear. On the same day, the Tiger Company saw its first combat action in Russia, participating in the destruction of a Soviet regimental-sized column that was moving west from Dimitrovka to Grushino. Fritz Hitz, a soldier involved in the battle, described his experience. "We always lead with a Tiger tank at the front, supported by 2 Panzer III tanks as escorts. I was in the crew of Bieber. Our gunner was Hempfinger, the loader was Hitz, the driver was Walter Gansera, and the radio operator was Theo Engels. For a while, we drove opposite the front line. Hempfinger and I smoked cigarettes, not out of fear, but with a certain nervous tension. We watched the artillery fire in the distance as if it were a fireworks display. Then the order came. Prepare for combat, hatches closed. I loaded an armor-piercing round into the gun's breech, as the second command echoed through the radio. T-34 tanks approaching from the front. Advance. The Tiger tank moved forward alongside us. The Soviet forces counterattacked with everything they had. Looking at our 50mm main gun, we wondered whether it would be effective against the T-34s. Suddenly, our gunner reported that he could not rotate the turret. He attempted again. Still nothing. Upon inspection, we discovered that a machine gun belt had become lodged in the turret ring. As we pushed forward, maneuvering to avoid anti-tank fire, a Tiger tank commanded by Konrad Berger destroyed a Soviet anti-tank gun. I believe he also knocked out 2 T-34 tanks, but I cannot say for certain. As I directed my commander to turn right, the situation quickly deteriorated. A Soviet soldier carrying an explosive pack charged toward our tank. Before we could react, he detonated the pack against our tracks, crippling our movement. The commander immediately reported the damage to Company Commander Mooslechner, who then ordered the loader to dismount and assess the situation. I stepped out to inspect the track while enemy fire continued. With only a hammer and my sidearm, I worked on repairing the damage. Luckily for us, Konrad Berger and his Tiger tank provided covering fire, keeping Soviet troops at bay. It felt as if the entire company was waiting on me to finish the repairs. Against the odds, I managed to restore the track, and we got moving again. Shortly after, Mooslechner announced over the radio, "Well done, Panzer 424. Later, a Hauptscharführer from the 4th Heavy Panzer Company shared a conversation he had with their company commander regarding the Tiger's battlefield performance. The commander described the Tiger's first battle as a wolf unleashed among a herd of sheep. He said, "The Tiger tank simply annihilated everything it fired upon. It felt unstoppable." Between March 4th and 5th, 1943, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3, along with other elements of the Totenkopf Division, supported the Das Reich Division in encircling a Soviet tank brigade and capturing the village of Okhotchai. On March 6th, the Totenkopf Division was designated as the Corps Reserve for the SS Panzer Corps. The following day, the 4th Heavy Panzer Company took the opportunity to perform much-needed maintenance on their vehicles. On March 8th, the Totenkopf Division was removed from the reserve and ordered south of Walki, advancing towards Stary Merchik. That same day, near Griekovo, an incident occurred involving Tiger tanks attempting to cross a frozen river. On the morning of March 8th, the 4th Heavy Panzer Company moved forward, covering a distance of 10 kilometers before encountering an obstacle, a frozen river blocking their advance. With no available bridging equipment, SS Untersturmführer Kohler decided to attempt a direct crossing in his Tiger tank. At first he managed to make progress, but suddenly the ice gave way. The Tiger plunged into the freezing water, fully submerging the fighting compartment. The crew barely escaped as icy water filled the tank. SS Untersturmführer Kohler, completely drenched, appeared devastated. Moments later, SS Untersturmführer Rathsack attempted to cross the same river in his Tiger tank, but his vehicle became bogged down, with the rear hull sinking into the embankment. Water and sludge flooded the engine compartment, rendering the tank immobile. The workshop platoon immediately began recovery efforts, draining Rathsack's tank before pulling it out. However, Kohler's Tiger was a much greater challenge. A large group of Soviet civilians was assembled and ordered to construct a mound leading to the sunken tank, a process that took several days. Once the mound was completed, the workshop platoon used pumps and hoses to drain the tank before recovering it. One of Kohler's crew members later recalled the incident, referring to it as the Bath of Griekovo. I no longer remember the exact location or the name of the river, but it was March 8, 1943. That day, we lost 2 Tiger tanks trying to cross a frozen river. Only a few days earlier, another Tiger tank had sunk through the ice, drowning its driver. The bridge ahead of us was rated for only 6 tons and looked unstable, yet our Tiger tanks were urgently needed in the Walki-Kharkov sector. With no alternative, we had to attempt the crossing. Before setting off, I took a moment to eat some rations, butter, liverwurst and bread. I also moved my pistol to my right side, fearing I might become trapped and drown. As we started moving, my commander spoke softly. We heard the ice cracking beneath us, and we could already see the far side of the river. If we made it across, we planned to celebrate with schnapps. Suddenly, without warning, the tank lurched violently upward like an elevator. Ice shattered beneath us, and freezing water rushed in. The weight of the water on my hatch trapped me inside. I struggled to move but was blocked by a 5-day ration box. My thick winter clothing made movement even harder. I fought my way toward the turret space, but I got stuck again. Water was rising fast. I saw an open turret hatch, clenched my fists, and pushed with all my strength. My life flashed before me. My mother, my sister, my father. I kept pushing until, finally, I squeezed through and got my head above water. A comrade tried to help, but the freezing water made it impossible. He ran off and returned with a ladder, stretching it out to me. I grabbed hold and was pulled onto the embankment, where I collapsed. When I regained consciousness, I was inside a Russian house, wrapped in fur for warmth. We recovered the tank in mid-April and towed it to Dnipropetrovsk for repairs. By then, SS Untersturmführer Kohler had already returned to the company. Our radio operator, however, had to spend time in the hospital before rejoining us. On March 10th, Fritz Hitz documented an unexpected skirmish while the company was conducting technical maintenance. We had full ammunition loads and fuel tanks ready. Some comrades, including SS Unterscharführer Hackel, Gunner Hempfinger and I, were busy working on the tanks. Suddenly, gunfire rang out. We saw muzzle flashes from a house and immediately assumed a Soviet raid. We returned fire and waited. More shots followed, and then I saw Hackel stumble. I ran to him, catching him under his arms as he fell. He had been shot in the chest. One of our men climbed into a panzer turret, returning fire with the machine gun. Later, Hempfinger and Theo Engels arrived with a captured partisan. A bullet had passed through Hempfinger's trousers and lodged in his cigarette case, saving his life. A few days later, we mourned another comrade, a Unterscharführer who was crushed when a Tiger tank accidentally reversed into a house where he had been sitting. On March 10th, the 2nd Company of the 1st Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3, was attached to the Panzer Grenadier Division Das Reich. The following day, the Leibstandarte SS Division launched a surprise assault on Kharkov, while to Kampfgruppe Baum, commanded by SS Obersturmbannführer Baum of SS Panzergrenadier Regiment 1 Totenkopf. That afternoon, the Kampfgruppe engaged in combat for Bolshaya Danilovka. Later, Baum attempted a night assault on Chuguyev, but intelligence reports of Soviet tanks in the rear forced a halt. Instead, the night of March 12th to 13th was spent securing supply lines and communications. On March 13th, Kampfgruppe Baum advanced toward Rogen, but progress was slow due to harsh weather and Soviet resistance. Tank duels ensued between SS Panzer Regiment 3 and Soviet forces. On March 14th, the Kampfgruppe faced further delays, this time waiting for fuel supplies. Operations remained largely inactive for most of the day. By March 15th to 16th, SS Obersturmbannführer Refitting led 2 successful counterattacks against Soviet tank and infantry forces near Kharkov and Chuguyev. The Soviets lost 9 tanks, while the 1st Battalion SS Panzer Regiment 3 reported the loss of 1 Panzer III. On March 18, 1943, responsibility for securing the Chuguyev sector was handed over to the 6th Panzer Division of the German Army. The 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 was reassigned to the 2nd Battalion of SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 2 Eicher, under the command of SS Sturmbannführer Launer. The advance toward Belgorod was slowed once again due to severe weather, forcing SS Sturmbannführer Launer to call a halt to further movement for the night. The next day, March 19th, both the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 and the 4th Heavy Panzer Company engaged in combat near Siberovka, then advanced to the heights near Ivanovka, where SS Hauptsturmführer Mooslechner, the company commander, was killed when a faulty fuse detonated a shell inside his Tiger tank. Following his death, SS Hauptsturmführer Biermeier, the former commander of the 6th Company, was appointed as the new Tiger Company commander. On March 21st, SS Obersturmbannführer Rinner was seriously wounded near Staritsa during a Soviet artillery barrage. On March 22nd, the Tiger tanks remained stationed in Ternavaya, and the following day, maintenance operations were conducted. That same day, Adolf Hitler ordered that all heavy panzer companies in the 3 Waffen-SS tank regiments be reorganized to include 14 Tiger tanks instead of the previous 9. On March 24th, 20 Tiger tank crews were selected for transport to Germany to receive 15 newly manufactured Tiger tanks. 2 days later, 6 crews departed for Paderborn, awaiting their allocation of new tanks. On March 27th, SS Sturmmann Fritz Hitz was awarded the Iron Cross Second Class for his actions during the March 3rd battle. With the capture of Kharkov and Belgorod, the Totenkopf Division was gradually relieved by the 320th Infantry Division, allowing Totenkopf to relocate south of Belgorod for rest and rehabilitation. The battles for Kharkov and Belgorod marked the last major German victory on the Eastern Front. On April 2nd, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 was sent to Nikolskoye for reorganization. The next day, SS Sturmbannführer Leiner, the commander of SS Panzer Regiment 3, was relieved of command due to his performance in the Kharkov battles. SS Sturmbannführer Kunstmann took over as regimental commander, while SS Sturmbannführer Bochmann was appointed as the new commander of the 2nd Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3. On April 22nd, the 4th Heavy Panzer Company was ordered to reorganize according to Kestien 1176E, March 5, 1943. The company was restructured into 3 platoons, each with 4 Tiger tanks, along with a company headquarters of 2 Tiger tanks. The 4th platoon was disbanded, and SS Oberscharführer Berger became the new company sergeant after Spiessbauer was granted home leave on May 1st. On May 1st, several new personnel joined the 4th Heavy Panzer Company, including Krawatsky, Brieger, Gluckel, Leutz, and Wagner. By June 1st, the 4th Company received a new issue of 14 Panzer IV tanks, originally allocated for the 2nd Company. On May 10th, 3 Tiger tanks repaired in Dnipropetrovsk were returned to service. The Tiger Company relocated to a new assembly area in Yushi, a journey that took 2 days. On May 20th, the newly activated 8th Company joined the 2nd Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3, receiving 15 Panzer IV tanks. On June 28th, 9th Company moved to a new staging area in preparation for Operation Citadel. In the early hours of July 5, 1943, SS Panzer Regiment 3 began its advance from the Rakovo sector at the start of Operation Citadel. Within 1.5 kilometers, the regiment lost a Panzer III to Soviet fire. 9th Company was attached to the 1st Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3, supporting the 1st Battalion, SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 5, mechanized. The first major obstacle was a tank ditch, which was breached by divisional engineers, allowing Tiger tanks to provide covering fire. The Soviets responded with intense artillery and anti-tank fire. By July 6th, only 6 Tiger tanks remained operational, as 5 had sustained mine damage. Several Stugy assault guns were also lost. On July 7th, 9th Company engaged Soviet forces near Nepchayevka, suffering further casualties. By July 12th, the company participated in an assault on Andreevka, crossing the Psel River on a temporary bridge. That day, SS Untersturmführer Kohler, the company commander, was killed in action. On July 13th, the company had 4 Tiger tanks undergoing repairs while continuing operations in the Kursk salient. On July 13, 1943, SS Untersturmführer Schuffler joined the 9th Company after being transferred from the Tiger Battalion of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. Before this, he had served in SS Kradschützen Battalion 2 between February 1942 and January 1943. At the beginning of July 1943, the SS Heavy Panzer Battalion, commanded by SS Sturmbannführer Lachmann, was transported to the Eastern Front, unloaded in Lubotin, and initially deployed in an infantry role. On July 13th, the 9th Company started the day with 4 operational Tiger tanks, seeing limited action near Hill 226 and along the Kartashevka Road. However, by the end of the day, every remaining Tiger tank had been rendered inoperable, with all 14 tanks sent to the workshop platoon for repairs. On July 15th, the Totenkopf Division withdrew from the Selle River bridgehead, taking up defensive positions along the southern bank of the river. The following day, Adolf Hitler officially suspended Operation Citadel, despite Field Marshal Erich von Manstein arguing that the offensive could still be salvaged. Instead, Operation Roland was devised, involving elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. On July 17th, orders were issued for the Leibstandarte SS Division and Das Reich Division to regroup near Belgorod. That same day, a transport plane carrying spare parts from Magdeburg for the 9th Company landed at Volchansk-Kharkov. The parts were collected from Panzer Repair Battalion 545. On July 18th, the 9th Company and 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 supported the 167th Infantry Division near Ivanovsky. The next day, the Tiger Company relocated near Lutsk, and on July 20th, orders were issued for the 2nd SS Panzer Corps to relocate 400 kilometers south. The tracked vehicles of the regiment were loaded onto rail transports in Belgorod and Kharkov. On July 22nd, the 9th Company travelled to Kharkov, preparing for redeployment. The company departed on July 24th, unloading in the Stalino-Rikovo area on July 26th. On July 29th, the 9th Company received 8 additional Tiger tanks from SS Panzer, Regiment 1 in Artemovsk, which was en route to Italy. Also handed over from SS Panzer Regiment 1 were 30 Panzer IV tanks, 17 to 5th Company, 13 to 1st Battalion, 4 Panzer III tanks. The 9th Company was able to re-establish the 4th Platoon, with SS Hauptscharführer Berger appointed as its commander. The other platoons were organised as follows: 1st Platoon, SS Untersturmführer Rathsack 2nd Platoon, SS Untersturmführer Quaid 3rd Platoon, SS Obersturmbannführer Schuffler. Each platoon was equipped with 5 Tiger tanks, while the company headquarters unit had 2 Tigers. The support units maintained an inventory of 55 wheeled and half-tracked vehicles. Wagner described the company's movements and engagements. The company had moved from Budi and assembled in a wooded area near Belgorod. On July 5th, the Luftwaffe flew overhead. Around midday, the company's support units fell in behind the 1st Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3. A fuel truck caught fire and exploded due to Soviet anti-tank fire. 2 of our Tiger tanks got bogged down, while others sustained mine damage to their running gear. Our commander's Tiger tank was immobilized in a minefield. An SS Hauptsturmführer Biermeier, Probst, and the driver attempted field repairs. Meanwhile, Quaid and Rathsack led the rest of the company into a nearby forest. The next day, the Soviet Air Force launched air raids on our positions. SS Sturmbannführer Kunzmann was killed, and SS Sturmbannführer Bochmann took over as regiment commander. SS Hauptsturmführer Biermeier was promoted to command 2nd Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3, and SS Obersturmbannführer Schröder took command of the Tiger Company. However, he lasted only half a day before being killed in action. SS Untersturmführer Kohler was then given command, but was killed shortly afterward. Finally, SS Hauptsturmführer Egon Richter, a Knight's Cross recipient, assumed command. That day, we also lost Lampert, while Hempfinger was wounded. Fritz Hitz, serving as a loader in a Tiger tank, recalled the events. I was relieved to be assigned to a Tiger tank since I had prior experience. We received the usual attack command and advanced. We spotted a T-34 tank near a windmill and quickly knocked it out. Moments later, we engaged and destroyed a second T-34. We moved into a cornfield when suddenly we heard Russian infantry shouting they had been hiding in the tall crops and launched a surprise attack against our tank. SS Obersturmbannführer Schröder immediately ordered, "Ludwig, open fire with the machine gun." I hesitated before informing him. "Sir, we don't have a turret MG. This is a command variant of the Tiger with an additional Fu-8 radio system instead." Schroeder then demanded, "Hand me the machine pistol." I hesitated again, knowing he intended to fire out of the hatch. I thought to myself, this is madness, but he insisted. I handed him the MP-40 submachine gun, and he climbed out of the turret hatch, firing at the oncoming Soviet infantry. Moments later, he fell back into the turret, his head destroyed by an anti-tank rifle round. Ludwig quickly ordered the driver to reverse, and we pulled back from the cornfield. Later, when it was safe, we removed Schroeder's body and laid him under a tree. He was a true daredevil. During World War I, he had served as a pilot. In my diary, I wrote, "A great loss." That same day, SS Unterscharführer Gockel was also killed in action. I remember Ludwig Lachner and Müller, but some other names of the crew escape me. On July 28, 1943, the Totenkopf Division regrouped in the Krasnaya region. The following day, SS Panzer Regiment 3 established its command post in Ramovsky, with its starting position set between Snezhnoye and Krasnaya. On July 30th, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3, supported by SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment Totenkopf and the 9th Company, launched an attack on Hill 213.9. However, the advance was immediately hindered by Soviet minefields, inflicting damage on multiple tanks. SS Hauptsturmführer Richter's account, Mayos Front, July 30th. We advanced into no man's land, heading toward the Russian defensive lines. Their infantry was deeply entrenched, forming a complex system of defensive positions, extending up to regimental level. The Soviets withdrew only at the last moment. We pressed on, pushing toward Hill 213.9 as mortar and machine gun fire rained down on us. Everything in our path was either crushed or overrun. During this engagement, SS Hauptsturmführer Richter's Tiger tank struck a mine. As he dismounted to inspect the damage, a Soviet mortar round exploded nearby, wounding him in the stomach. He was evacuated and treated at multiple hospitals before being reassigned to training duties. He later took command of the 2nd Battalion, SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 95 of the 38th SS Grenadier Division Nibelungen in March 1945. Following Richter's evacuation, SS Obersturmbannführer Schuffler assumed command of the 9th Company. The attack pressed on as minefields were gradually cleared, but the Soviets responded with heavy artillery and anti-tank fire. The Tiger tanks provided covering fire for the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3, but radio operator Gunther Groner was killed during the battle. Rolf Stettner, a soldier from the 5th Company, 2nd Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3, recalled, "The Soviets developed new metal-cased mines specifically to combat our Tiger tanks. Before this, they had used wood-encased mines, typically 20 to 30 centimeters in diameter." On August 1st, our Panzer Regiment was forced to shift formation to the right due to intense Soviet anti-tank fire. The Tiger tanks advanced ahead of us, but as I looked beside me, one had come to a sudden halt. Throughout the day, SS Panzer Regiment 3 engaged in bitter fighting near Hill 213.9. By nightfall, the 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 and the 9th Company had reached the northwestern slope of the hill. However, 8 Tigers were sent for repairs, suffering damage to their running gear, tracks, and hulls. During these engagements, SS Sturmen Matai was killed near Stepanovka. On July 31st, the assault on Hill 213.9 resumed. Every meter of ground was heavily contested. The Luftwaffe provided close air support with Stuka dive bombers, but the Soviets continued resisting fiercely. During the battle, the Tiger tanks commanded by SS Oberscharführer Lampert and SS Unterscharführer Bieber were destroyed by anti-tank fire. SS Oberscharführer Lampert was killed, though his crew managed to escape. Also killed in action that day were Kochesser and Schweitzer. The final assault on Hill 213.9, August 1st to 2nd, 1943. The Totenkopf Division renewed its assault on August 1st, encountering more minefields, intense anti-tank gunfire, and heavy artillery barrages. The 1st Battalion of SS Panzer Regiment 3 suffered flanking fire from Soviet forces. Several tank crews who bailed out were forced to fight on foot. During the battle, the Tiger tank commanded by Karl Sandler was damaged, taking a direct hit to its running gear. Meanwhile, 9th Company suffered another fatality when loader Gunther Schreier was killed. By late afternoon, the Totenkopf Division reported to the 2nd SS Panzer Corps that Hill 213.9 had been secured, but at great cost. On August 2nd, the 9th Company and other divisional elements launched another attack across Hill 191.3. During this battle, SS Untersturmführer Schuffler was badly wounded and later died. SS Untersturmführer Quard then assumed command of the 9th Company. Later that day, Kochesser, Lampert and Schweitzer were buried. July 6th and 21st, I was granted home leave. When I returned on July 27th, the company was already deployed at the Mies front. We received orders to assault Hill 213.9 near Stepanovka, where radio operator Schweitzer, serving in Probst's Tiger, was killed in action. On August 2nd, the company was loaded onto transport trains in Gorlovka, Horlivka, and later unloaded in Merefa. Heavy fighting near Kharkov, August 12th to 14th, 1943. On August 12th, we launched an attack west of Kharkov. I was positioned as a radio operator inside SS Untersturmführer Quade's command Tiger, with Kolki as our primary objective. The attack failed. We suffered 2 total tank losses, and 3 other Tigers were severely damaged. Our Tiger tank remained operational, but SS Untersturmführer Fein's crew was killed when their Tiger was completely burned out. During the same battle, SS Oberscharführer Lampert was killed, and both SS Untersturmführer Rathsack and SS Rottenführer Schlab were seriously wounded. The following day, August 13th, we advanced further alongside Panzerabteilung Großdeutschland, attacking Kachalovka. Heavy losses were reported on both sides. The Russians lost several tanks, and so did we. On August 14th, we engaged in combat across multiple villages, including Alexeyevka, Marufa, Medjanik, and Ridlo, covering approximately 40 kilometers. Advancing toward Kolontayev, August 16th to 30th, 1943. By August 16th, 2 more Tiger tanks had returned to active service following repairs. The company was assigned to secure the Mertschik-Merla sector. On August 20th, our unit advanced toward Kolontayev, where SS Sturmen Volga was killed in action. Our forces successfully linked up with the Großdeutschland division north of Alexeyevka. The next morning, strong Soviet armoured forces attempted a breakout. However, they were met with fierce defensive fire from our tank crews. Gunner Lawrence managed to destroy 2 Russian tanks. By August 30th, an attack was launched with 2 Tiger tanks, advancing along the heights south of Kolontayev. During the assault, SS Unterscharführer Privatsky's Tiger was hit by an artillery shell, killing the driver, Bachmann. The tank was deemed a total loss. Despite the setbacks with infantry support, our unit secured the heights. Later that night, we detected heavy enemy movement, including tanks repositioning. SS Sturmen Winter and 6 other men worked through the night to repair our main gun, which had been rendered inoperable. Soviet counterattack at 0400 hours. At 0400, the Soviets launched a counterattack, heavily targeting our positions with artillery and anti-tank fire. SS Untersturmführer Quade's Tiger took a direct hit from an anti-tank rifle round in the commander's cupola. The impact instantly killed SS Sturmen Winter and wounded the driver, Hilgard. Despite his injuries, Hilgard managed to maneuver the Tiger into cover, avoiding further incoming anti-tank fire. Erich Lehmkuhl's account, mid-August, 1943. After the Mies front campaign, our company was loaded onto trains in Yasnovodia and transported north. Near Walki, we unloaded and began immediate repairs on our Tigers. The Werkstatt platoon worked around the clock, using electrowelding equipment to repair battle damage. Afterward, the Tigers received a fresh coat of paint. Those tanks requiring minimal repairs were placed under the command of Regimental Commander Standartenführer Bochmann. At this point, the company was under SS Untersturmführer Quade's leadership. He was a capable commander, despite the fact that he had only one eye. First platoon was led by SS Untersturmführer Rathsack, August 11th, preparations for combat. On August 11th, we moved to a forward village preparing for deployment. Quade planned to attack along an east-west axis to counter Russian territorial gains. The waiting was unbearable. By 1600 hours, we finally received orders to advance toward a series of heights. As we descended, the Ukrainian landscape unfolded before us. At a distance of 2.5 kilometers, we spotted a large Soviet column in motion, a mix of vehicles, tanks, artillery, and horse-drawn wagons, escorted by infantry units. Realizing that the Russians were preparing defensive positions, we observed Soviet soldiers spreading out to secure their flanks. Soon, heavy fire rained down on us, but suddenly, Luftwaffe He-111 bombers arrived overhead. The bombers carpet-bombed the Russian column, decimating their ranks. As the infantry followed up with a ground assault, we were ordered to hold our position. However, while withdrawing, we fired a few high-explosive rounds at dispersing enemy units. The heat was unbearable, reaching 30 degrees Celsius. Our Tiger developed gear problems, but repairs were quickly carried out by Karl Frank, our indispensable mechanic. The ambush at the village. The next day, August 12th, after a peaceful night, we were ordered to advance westward. We formed up in a village previously cleared by SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment Eike. The Grenadiers had conducted house-to-house searches, ensuring that the area was secured. As we moved along the road into another village, everything seemed eerily quiet. Only chickens wandered through the streets. There were no signs of civilians. Something felt wrong. As we entered, figures in brown uniforms darted into a nearby field. We fired machine gun bursts, but no counterattack followed. Were the Soviets playing a game? Quaid decided to seize the heights beyond the village, deploying us in a wedge formation. Everything had been too easy so far. Approximately 1 kilometer from the heights, Quaid ordered a halt. He sent SS Untersturmführer Rathsack ahead to scout. Moments later, a blinding flash erupted. An explosion rocked our position. Our driver was temporarily blinded, while our radio sets were knocked out. Franz immediately reversed the Tiger, moving carefully to avoid throwing a track. We found cover 200 meters back, escaping further anti-tank fire. The tragic outcome. As we re-established communications, an SS Oberscharführer reported grim news over the radio. 1 dead, headshot. SS Untersturmführer Rathsack and his gunner are wounded. From our position, we saw our Tiger tanks on the right, but no sign of 1st Platoon. Then, in the distance, we saw it, a burning Tiger tank. It was SS Unterscharführer Fein's Tiger 913, engulfed in flames. Quaid and Hilgart rushed to the scene as our infantry provided covering fire. The battle had taken a heavy toll, another day of death and destruction on the Eastern Front. Aftermath of the battle, the fate of Fein's Tiger. After advancing only 500 meters, we still saw no sign of the Russians. Those moving on foot approached Fein's burning Tiger tank from the side, aware that the 8.8 centimeter ammunition could still ignite. Franz Hofer succumbed to his wounds, while inside the wreckage we found Fein's lifeless body. His Tiger had been struck on the front by a 9.2 centimeter anti-tank shell, a round capable of penetrating even the strongest armor. As we stood there, Hofer lay in front of us, his life taken by the battle. He was a good-hearted soldier, but we had no time to grieve. The Russians were closing in, advancing with hand grenades in hand. We remounted our Tiger, preparing for another engagement. The day's toll was devastating. 7 dead, 3 wounded, and 1 Tiger tank completely destroyed. Another 4 Tigers sustained severe damage, requiring extensive repairs. Our company commander's Tiger was still operational, but our own tank had taken 2 hits. One of the rounds struck just above the driver's vision block, a few centimeters lower, and it could have been fatal. Soviet counterattack and the power of Nebelwerfers. Not long after, the Russians opened fire again, laying down suppressive artillery that caused further casualties among our infantry. Their infantry forces launched an assault, but Quaid's Tiger responded with accurate fire, tearing through their ranks. The Russian attack stalled, and our infantry launched a counter-offensive. Suddenly, the howling of rockets filled the air, followed by massive explosions on the heights ahead. Our Nebelwerfer batteries had opened fire. As our infantry struggled up the heights, we could contribute only limited support. We had just 1 operational Tiger, which could only provide covering fire. Later in the evening, we moved forward, advancing toward the anti-tank gun positions that had caused such devastation earlier. What we found was shocking. 8 American anti-tank guns, capable of the same firepower as our 8.8 centimeter cannons. The Nebelwerfer fire had completely demoralized the Russian crews, forcing them to abandon their positions. A quiet night and an unexpected encounter. That night, everything fell eerily silent. In the darkness, we could hear the Russians talking loudly while we spoke in softer tones. Suddenly, out of the darkness, a lone rider approached. His shoulder epaulettes made it clear. He was a Russian officer. At that moment, Franz, our driver, dropped his sandwich, muttering, "Rookie wash," while gesturing with his hand. The Russian officer realized his mistake. He was surrounded by German troops. Turning his horse sharply, he tried to escape, but our infantry opened fire. His horse collapsed, yet somehow the officer managed to get up and disappear into the night. We ran over to the fallen horse, recovering the officer's saddle and equipment, which was made from fine leather. We later handed all leather items to the company shoemaker, who crafted new boots and sports shoes for our men. A night of artillery fire and the attack at dawn. At 0300 hours, we were awakened by loud noises of moving tanks, seemingly all around us. However, it quickly became clear that this was not the enemy. It was a Tiger battalion from the German army maneuvering through our positions. After 10 minutes, an enormous artillery barrage erupted, followed by rocket fire, shaking the ground beneath us. We moved out, forming a wedge formation, much like a training exercise, and advanced toward another village. As we approached, we saw flames rising from burning houses, their thatched roofs ablaze. However, it became clear that the Russians had set up an anti-tank defense line. A Tiger on our right fired first, engaging targets at 1,000 meters. We quickly followed suit, unleashing our own cannon fire. This exchange lasted 15 minutes before we pushed into the village's main road. Moving off to the right with 4 Tigers, we advanced with infantry support, securing our positions for the night. The Soviet forces had suffered heavily, overwhelmed by 36 Tiger tanks from the 3rd Panzer Regiment Großdeutschland. That evening, our army counterparts withdrew, leaving us to continue the offensive alone, supported only by our own grenadier units. On July 1st, 1943, Piper's Armoured Personnel Carrier Battalion was tactically attached to the Leibstandarte Armoured Group, marking the first appearance of the tactical concept of the Armoured Group. This structure, based on Guderian's principles of panzer tactics, aimed to group panzer units, mechanized panzer grenadiers, self-propelled artillery, panzer reconnaissance forces, and panzer pioneers under the command of an experienced leader to maximize firepower, mobility, and effectiveness in battle. These armoured battle groups proved highly successful and continued to be used until the end of the war. During Operation Citadel, the Leibstandarte Armoured Group included Piper's APC Battalion, 2nd Battalion of 1st SS Panzer Regiment, 1 Company of the Anti-Tank Battalion, 2nd Battalion SS Artillery Regiment, and No. 6th Company of SS Flak Battalion. On July 2nd, 1943, Piper's APC Battalion reached its designated assembly area in preparation for the attack. By midday on July 3rd, Piper held a situation conference, revealing the final details of the offensive. The men, sensing the importance of the upcoming battle, displayed high morale, even holding a feast before the launch of the operation. Operation Citadel was designed to close a critical 200-kilometer gap in the German front, formed after the capture of Biel-Gorod. Hitler's strategy aimed to destroy Soviet forces, shorten the front line, and prevent an immediate Soviet counteroffensive. However, repeated delays in launching the operation, primarily due to delays in equipment deliveries, pushed the attack back until July 5, 1943. The Leibstandarte Division, part of Hausser's 2nd SS Panzer Corps in Hoth's 4th Panzer Army, faced several challenges going into the battle. The 1st Battalion of the Panzer Regiment was still in Germany, converting to Panther tanks, leaving only 3 companies from 2nd Battalion, the 13th Tiger Company and the 14th Pioneer Company to take part in the attack. The division's SP Gun Battalion, newly equipped with 10.5 cm assault howitzers, and its Anti-Tank Battalion were also available. On July 2, 1943, the Leibstandarte Division's available armour consisted of 11 Tigers, 72 Panzer IV, 16 Panzer II and the IIIs, and 31 self-propelled guns. Many of its units had already moved into position on July 1st, while the Leibstandarte Armoured Group reached its readiness area on the night of July 4, 1943. The Soviets, aware of the impending attack, had built one of the most formidable defensive systems in military history. In the Kursk salient alone, they had dug over 9,240 kilometers of trenches, constructed 8 defensive belts stretching 300 kilometers deep, and fortified the region with bunkers, tank traps, anti-tank fronts, and thousands of mines. Special emphasis was placed on anti-tank defense, with each Soviet rifle company containing teams equipped with Molotov cocktails, grenades, and limpet mines to combat German heavy armor. Additionally, new Soviet anti-tank guns, including the 5.7 cm ZIS-2, were deployed in large numbers. The Soviets buried tanks up to their turrets to serve as defensive strongpoints and laid 1,500 anti-tank mines per kilometer of the front. The 81st Rifle Division alone placed 2,133 anti-tank mines and 2,126 anti-personnel mines in its sector. German reconnaissance estimated that 212 Soviet tanks were positioned directly in front of the Leibstandarte's advance on July 3, 1943. The operation began on the night of July 4, 1943, with German forces eliminating Soviet forward outposts at 2300 hours. The Leibstandarte's battle order dictated that armoured forces would advance only after Soviet strongpoints east of Prokhorovka had been neutralised, allowing them to push northeast toward Yakovlevo and secure a bridgehead over the Sel River. The 8th Air Corps was assigned to provide air support, concentrating on .22, 0.5, while artillery preparation was scheduled from 0315 to 0405 on July 5th. At 0405 on July 5, 1943, the Leibstandarte's Panzer Grenadiers launched their assault against 25 kilometers of heavily mined terrain, barbed wire, bunkers, and trench networks. The 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment under SS Obersturmbannführer Hugo Krass led the first attack, reaching an anti-tank ditch near Hill 220.5, while 1st Battalion of the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment advanced nearby. Despite heavy artillery fire from Soviet positions on the western bank of the Wasklar River, the 2nd Regiment moved forward after pioneers successfully constructed bridges over the anti-tank ditch. With support from Tigers and self-propelled guns, they captured Hill 220.5 after a 5-hour battle. By midday, the 2nd Regiment secured Hill 217.1, providing fire support for the advancing 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, which then took Hill 215.4, located 2.5 kilometers south of Prokhorovka. By afternoon, both regiments had entered Prokhorovka together. Meanwhile, Piper's APC battalion was held in reserve, awaiting orders to advance through Soviet defensive positions east of Yakovlevo and establish a bridgehead over the Sel River. At 1800 hours, his panzers and APCs finally moved out, advancing over Hill 234.8, but they encountered a strong Soviet anti-tank defense line near Yakovlevo at daybreak on July 6th, forcing a temporary halt. Gurs, Piper's company commander, described the brutal combat conditions. The battle had raged since 3 a.m. The Russian Air Force launched heavy attacks, and the intensity of enemy artillery was staggering. Our armoured group moved forward at 1400, finally pushing past our own front lines. The Russian defences were fierce. Flamethrowers, anti-tank guns, and mines inflicted early losses on our tanks. Despite the resistance, SS Captain Kling's 3 Tigers broke through, crushing the first Soviet defensive sector. The German advance continued through open fields, valleys and hills with Panzer IVs, Tigers, self-propelled guns, APCs, grills, artillery and anti-tank vehicles forming an overwhelming armoured spearhead. As night fell on July 5th, Piper's battalion found itself under Soviet air attack, forcing them to halt their advance near Yakovlevo. On July 6th, at 0500 hours, the Soviets launched a massive counterattack using artillery and tanks, temporarily halting the German advance. However, Stuka dive bombers were called in, relieving the pressure. Frey's 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment stormed Hill 243.2, overcoming minefields and barbed wire fortifications to capture the strategic position by 9:45. By 13:30 they had taken Hill 230.5 in intense close-quarters combat, providing a critical base of operations for the Leibstandarte armoured group. SS Brigade Führer Wisch personally led the next phase of the offensive, directing an attack through Luchki North and Teterovino toward the Sel River sector. However, at 13:15 and 1400, Soviet tank forces launched counterattacks, attempting to break through SS positions east of Yakovlevo. These were repelled by Leibstandarte's armoured forces, with SS Captain Heinz Kling's Tigers leading a pursuit against retreating Soviet units. Despite significant German territorial gains, the depth and intensity of Soviet defences at Kursk meant that Leibstandarte and the rest of the KSS Panzer Corps were facing the strongest resistance they had ever encountered. The battle for Kursk was only beginning, but it was already clear that this would be a clash of unprecedented scale and ferocity. On July 7th, 1943, the Leibstandarte's armoured spearhead pushed 60 to 70 kilometres deep into Soviet-held territory near Prokhorovka, engaging in intense armoured battles. In just 2 days, Piper's APC battalion and accompanying tank forces destroyed 50 T-34s, a KV-1, a KV-2 and 43 medium and heavy anti-tank guns. The APC battalion reached a ridge 2 kilometres southwest of Teterovino, advancing further into the high ground north of the village. Gurs, one of the officers present, recalled the battle. "We faced a strongly fortified Soviet position high up on a ridge, At midday, our infantry launched a direct assault and took the position. Hats off to them! We suffered casualties from artillery and tank fire. Schellhorn was killed, Meuse was wounded, and we had 6 wounded in total. We had yet to launch a proper attack, yet losses were already mounting. In the afternoon, the Soviets counterattacked, trying to reclaim the lost ground. A full tank brigade came at us from the flank. Our panzers held firm, engaging them head-on. This was the first major tank battle for the Leibstandarte, and I watched it unfold from the ridge. It was incredible to witness. The Leibstandarte battalion moved north, supported by reconnaissance and panzer units, attempting to secure the Selle River. As they advanced, they encountered minefields, tank traps and anti-tank ditches. The leading elements hit mines, with 4 panzers disabled, and the Stuka liaison officer's APC destroyed by fire. Unable to push further in the darkness, the battalion dug in for the night. At 1:30 hours, an urgent radio report came from Number 12 Company. Soviet tanks were closing in on their position. More tanks were spotted near Number 13 Company's sector. Despite the precarious situation, there was little panic among the men. When the attack came, the Soviets lost 5 of their 16 T-34s, with some tank crews surrendering. Captured Soviet prisoners revealed that their unit had just arrived from Moscow on July 5th, indicating that the Soviets were already committing reserves. In a daring nighttime raid, 3 Soviet tanks broke through German lines, carrying infantry on their hulls. One of Kling's Tigers was positioned along the road and destroyed all 3 tanks at close range, just 10 meters away. On July 7th, the Leibstandarte occupied a key defensive line, stretching from Tetrovino north to Prokhorovka east, with elements positioned west of Ulyanov. The 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment successfully captured Prokhorovka and Yakovlevo, repelling multiple Soviet tank attacks from Oboyan. The Luftwaffe provided crucial support, with Stuka dive bombers hammering Soviet positions. The Soviets also launched attacks at Luchki, all of which were repulsed. By 0600 hours, following heavy Stuka raids on Soviet defences near Tetrovino, the APC Battalion, Leibstandarte Armoured Group and Das Reich Armoured Group pushed toward Prokhorovka. At 7:10 hours, they encountered Soviet tanks coming from the north and northeast, engaging them in a fierce battle that lasted until midday. Eventually, the Soviets withdrew, regrouping for another push. Gers recalled the chaotic nature of the fighting. We shot down a Soviet reconnaissance aircraft. This happened at least 10 times a day. By now, it was routine. We were effectively cut off from the main German lines, but nobody seemed alarmed. We felt confident. Major Tixon of the Das Reich Division destroyed 35 Soviet tanks in a single engagement. Meanwhile, I finally washed myself for the first time in 5 days. At 1600 hours, one of our recon aircraft reported 35 Soviet tanks gathering behind a ridge preparing for an attack. Piper and SS Major Gross discussed the situation. Gross immediately launched an armoured assault, and within hours we had destroyed 16 of the enemy tanks without a single loss of our own. By July 8, 1943, the Leibstandarte Armoured Group set off northwest at 0800 hours. Near Wesley, at 0920 hours, they engaged over 40 Soviet tanks in a pitched battle lasting an hour. After regrouping, they moved west at 1100 hours and renewed their assault on Wesley at 1205 hours. Gers described the combat in Wesley. By midday, the battle had fully erupted. I was in the second wave, behind the panzers. We took the first village, but at Rilsky and Wesley, things became difficult. Dug-in Soviet tanks, anti-tank guns and infantry stood in our way. The Russians had already infiltrated the village we had set out from, bringing 35 tanks with them. Meanwhile, 2 damaged Tigers had remained behind at Tetrovino. Despite their limited mobility, they annihilated all Soviet tanks that entered the town, an incredible feat given their isolated position. Piper took personal command of the battle group, ordering an immediate assault on Rilsky. He led a coordinated charge with tanks and mechanized panzer grenadiers, demonstrating the effectiveness of integrated armored warfare. Gers described the intensity of the battle. Piper's voice crackled over the radio, telling us to go and keep up. It was a mad dash forward. I pushed my men to their limits. We had to maintain speed. Our success depended on it. The anti-tank gun APCs were close behind me. Vont was at my left. As we closed in, enemy fire intensified. Smoke filled the battlefield. Suddenly, 2 Russian tanks emerged through the haze, firing wildly. I called for a retreat to a small depression 300 meters behind us, using it as cover. We could see 17 enemy tanks at 1,500 meters. Our 6 grill guns opened fire, hammering them with high explosive rounds. As darkness fell, I disengaged and attempted to re-establish contact with Piper over the radio. The prisoners captured later revealed that 80 Soviet tanks had been hidden in the area. However, when faced with a rapid Panzer Grenadier assault, they abandoned their positions and retreated. During the battle, a single Tiger destroyed 14 Soviet tanks, effectively sealing victory for the Leibstandarte in this sector. By July 9, 1943, supply lines to the Leibstandarte armoured group were repeatedly cut by Soviet tanks, forcing a tactical withdrawal to more secure positions. The 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment reached Rilski without resistance, signalling a shift in the battle's momentum. SS Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Cross, commanding the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, wrote, "The Soviets are throwing everything they have at us. Every engagement escalates into something larger. We are facing a full-scale tank battle, and our only option is to commit all available forces to ensure victory." Despite the brutal tank engagements, the battle tactics of combining panzers and mechanized Panzer Grenadiers proved highly effective. The Leibstandarte's officers quickly adapted to these new battlefield conditions, realizing that Panzer Grenadiers in APCs could keep up with tanks in mobile warfare, creating an ideal strike force. Piper, a master of rapid coordination and decisive action, demonstrated how integrating armoured and infantry forces could achieve battlefield superiority. On July 10, 1943, the Leibstandarte Division launched another assault on Prokhorovka, a battle that would go down as one of the largest tank clashes in history. The stakes had never been higher, and both sides knew that this battle would determine the fate of the Eastern Front. On July 10, 1943, the Leibstandarte Division launched another assault on Prokhorovka, a battle that would go down as one of the largest tank clashes in history. The stakes had never been higher, and both sides knew that this battle would determine the fate of the Eastern Front. On July 11, 1943, as midday approached, the battlefield was suddenly struck by torrential rain, turning the terrain into thick mud, slowing down the attack of the Leibstandarte. Despite this, the German forces attempted to press forward but were brought to a standstill due to the overwhelming strength of Soviet defences. The pioneers were ordered to clear mines, which had been hastily laid by Soviet forces to halt the German advance. In the midst of these efforts, an anti-tank round struck the APC commanded by Corporal Willy Bott, piercing through the hatch and fatally wounding Bott in the lungs. The crew quickly bailed out. SS Grenadier Schobel, serving as co-driver and radio operator, was also hit in the chest, suffering severe blood loss. He managed to radio his officer, SS Captain Goul, reporting his condition. Goul responded with an urgent order instructing Schobel, "If Schobel can still drive, take the APC back to supply with Corporal Bott and the wounded." Schobel obeyed the order, bringing the damaged APC back to the rear lines before reporting to the main dressing station for medical attention. Meanwhile, SS Captain Goul himself was wounded in the thigh by a shell fragment. Despite the injury, he was treated by Dr. Bremer at the APC battalion's temporary dressing station, where the fragment was removed, and he was back with his company by the next day. Other officers were not as fortunate. SS Lieutenant Preuss, commander of No. 12th Company, was shot through the neck and had to be evacuated to the Corps military hospital in Kharkov. Elsewhere on the battlefield, the Grill self-propelled artillery units near the anti-tank ditch were engaged in fierce combat. Soviet rocket launchers fired waves of missiles, to which the Grill platoon responded with heavy bombardment. However, Soviet artillery targeted the Grill sector, resulting in casualties. Staff Sergeant Bernd von Bergmann, the deputy commander of the Grill platoon, and company runner SS LDG, Grenadier Schwanke were wounded, while Grill gun captain SS Corporal Bachmann was killed. The battalion's medical team was also affected. SS Captain Dr. Bristol, the battalion surgeon, was wounded but refused evacuation and remained with his men on the front lines. Additionally, SS Captain Herbert Molt, a staff officer, was killed while travelling by motorcycle. That evening, war correspondent Dr. Herbert Schramm, stationed with Piper's battalion, composed a draft article for a military magazine, capturing the intensity of the ongoing battle. 7 days of relentless attack, 7 days of brutal close combat for every field position, every trench, every anti-tank ditch, 7 days of ferocious fighting against the deeply entrenched Soviet fortifications that encircled the armoured fist of Kursk. 7 days of searing heat and sudden downpours, the relentless scream of artillery shells, the roaring descent of Stukas, the rhythmic clanking of panzer treads, the endless bursts of machine gun fire, and the haunting cries of the wounded. 7 nights illuminated by the glow of burning villages, the flashes of artillery, and the erratic strikes of Soviet night bombers, the flying sewing machines, which searched tirelessly for our supply convoys in the dense forests. Every minute felt longer than an hour, yet, at the same time, it seemed as if the attack had begun only yesterday. The storming of Red Height, the capture of the second tank ditch, the brutal advance along the Rollbahn, the desperate close combat with T-34s, the vast tank graveyard at Ruchny Wood, and the endless shell fire of the past 4 hours. These memories blur together, merging into one chaotic, nightmarish recollection. Now, on the evening of July 11th, our men stand among the captured Soviet field positions. Our APCs are lined up in precise order, and for the first time in days, the soldiers find relief knowing that tonight there are no trenches to dig. Instead, they take shelter in Soviet-dug bunkers. And yet, no one is truly at ease. Most restless of all is SS Sturmbannführer Piper. He paces between the captured trenches, visibly irritated. Today was supposed to be different. Today was supposed to be the moment when his battalion would finally break through, unleashing a lightning-fast pursuit to crush the retreating enemy. And then, the halt order from high command. The battalion was ordered to hold position and wait. Hours of enduring Soviet artillery barrages, hours of watching his tanks be denied permission to fire back, even when enemy positions were clearly in sight. Short steps, they said. You were advancing too fast. Wait for the neighbouring divisions. The men of Piper's battalion had been eagerly anticipating the next great offensive thrust. They understood his frustration. His disappointment was their own. The battalion was his battalion, and they took immense pride in their armoured assault capabilities. But they also knew that the war in the East provided no shortage of opportunities to prove themselves. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new tests, new victories. As night fell, Panzer Grenadiers combed through Soviet trenches, capturing stragglers who had remained hidden, surrendering with sheepish grins. In one trench they discovered a fallen Soviet commissar, his body sprawled across the trench floor. His battle blouse bore the red enamel Order of Lenin, marking him as an officer of high rank and distinction. Captured Soviet submachine guns, rifles and anti-tank weapons were piled into transport trucks, repurposed for German use. By nightfall, the rugged German field kitchens arrived, bringing hot meals to the exhausted men. The long-awaited soup, steaming and thick, provided a rare moment of comfort amid the brutal campaign. Afterward, sentries were posted, and the men settled down for a much-needed rest. War correspondent Schramm recalled the night's final moments. We found shelter in a small, primitive bunker alongside the company troop. The earth, still damp from the day's rain, carried the scent of wild herbs, thyme, peppermint, and chamomile. It was a stark contrast to the acrid smoke and burning oil that had filled the air for days. Slowly, the echoes of battle faded, replaced by the rhythmic breathing of exhausted men drifting into sleep. I lay down, pistol on my left, submachine gun on my right, my steel helmet serving as a pillow. A bedbug crawled over my wrist, but after all I had endured today, such a minor discomfort was hardly worth noticing. The images of battle flickered in my mind, replaying like silent film reels in my dreams. At some point during the evening, Schramm made an unsettling discovery. The gun sight of his grill had been damaged during the battle. It was too dark to attempt repairs, forcing him to wait until morning to restore the gun's accuracy. As July 12th dawned, the Leibstandarte's advance would continue, pushing deeper into the chaotic battle for Prokhorovka, where one of the largest tank battles in history was about to unfold. The Kursk offensive had reached its climax, and both sides prepared for an apocalyptic clash of armoured might. On July 12, 1943, the armoured group of the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment and the Reconnaissance Battalion were ordered to capture Prokhorovka and Hill 252.4, eliminating threats on the flanks near the Sel River, with support from the Totenkopf Division. This day would go down in history as the largest tank battle ever fought. At dawn, 150 Soviet tanks smashed through the German front lines, rushing towards Piper's APC battalion on Hill 252.2 and 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment at SWCH Stalinsk. SS2/Lieutenant Erhard Gurs, the company commander, recalled the shock of the mass Soviet attack. The night before, we had seized Hill 252.2, driving the Russians from their trenches and fortifications. We occupied their abandoned positions and posted sentries. At 700 hours, the enemy struck. The Soviets had 148 tanks stretched over a 1-kilometer front, with infantry riding on the hulls. We were caught off guard. Most of us were asleep when the attack began. Suddenly, the roar of Soviet aircraft filled the sky, followed by waves of T-34s charging directly at us. The battlefield erupted into chaos. They were around us, over us and between us. We fought man to man. We grabbed limpet charges from our APCs, jumped back into our trenches, and waited for the perfect moment to strike each tank. The battle raged for 2 hours. By 9 a.m. we had regained full control of the battlefield. My company alone destroyed 15 Soviet tanks. The Grill self-propelled guns were positioned near the anti-tank ditch when the Soviet armoured wave surged forward. Tank shells and artillery fire exploded all around. SS Grenadier Schramm, operating one of the Grills, spotted 2 T-34s firing from a nearby farmyard. With his gun sight still malfunctioning, he was forced to fire by estimation. His first 2 shots straddled the target, one short, one long, but his third shot struck home, destroying both tanks at a range of 1,100 to 1,200 meters. The battle took a heavy toll. SS2/Lieutenant Otto Bulk, commander of the Grill platoon, was hit by shrapnel below the collarbone. The chunk of metal was the size of a fist. Schramm rushed him to the main dressing station, but Bulk succumbed to his wounds 3 days later at the Corps Military Hospital in Kharkov. Staff Sergeant Rudi Vierten took over command of the Grill platoon. Other Panzer Grenadiers demonstrated remarkable bravery in close combat. SS leading grenadiers Erich Jost and Günther Vogel of the anti-tank group each destroyed a T-34 in close quarters fighting. In total, Gurs's company eliminated 15 Soviet tanks. Gurs later reflected on the brutal encounter. The mental strain was unbearable. You can tolerate the most horrific things, but this? 148 wrecked tanks lay strewn across the battlefield. We had proven our superiority, but it was a costly victory. Little Polanski was dead in the trench. 2, Lieutenant Bulk mortally wounded. I do not want to count them all. Among the fallen were SS Corporal Hannes Dufert of No. 14 Company and SS2/Lieutenant Rudi Wetzel of No. 11th Company. SS Leading Grenadier Johannes Breuer, driver of SS Corporal Frobel's mortar APC, later described the battlefield chaos. I had been fighting since the invasion of the Soviet Union, from Zhytomyr to Rostov, but I had never experienced anything like Prokhorovka. It all happened so fast, T-34s roaring past, ramming into each other, exploding and burning. We had limpet mines but no Panzerfaust. T-34s came over the ridge, ploughed through our position, and crashed into the anti-tank ditch. By 9 a.m. I was wounded, shrapnel in my left eye and lung. Captain Brussel bandaged me, but I was nearly blind. How I made it out of that hellhole remains a mystery to me. Even Piper himself was caught off guard by the Soviet mass attack. In the midst of the chaos, Piper personally climbed onto a passing T-34, forced open the hatch and dropped a bundle of grenades inside. Moments later, a dull explosion shook the tank. His adjutant, Werner Wolf, led No. 13 Company after its commander Vandt was wounded. With tremendous energy and composure, he organised a defensive line, deployed anti-tank teams, and even retrieved weapons and ammunition from burning APCs. He personally destroyed a T-34 in hand-to-hand combat, killing the Soviet general commanding the attack with the general's own dagger. For this remarkable display of leadership, Piper recommended Wolf for the Knight's Cross. On July 12, 1943, at Hill 252.2, the Soviets launched a surprise attack with 150 tanks. They smashed through our lines, overrunning our Panzer Grenadiers in their foxholes. Wolf, despite being outnumbered and leaderless, took charge of his company, established a defensive front, and organised anti-tank squads. He risked his life to retrieve weapons from burning vehicles, ensuring his men had the firepower to resist. Wolf himself destroyed a T-34 in close combat and personally killed a Soviet general in hand-to-hand combat. By evening, an entire Soviet tank corps had been annihilated, and the old German front line was restored. This victory was directly linked to Wolf's decisive leadership. Second Lieutenant Colonel Frey, commander of the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, was stunned by the ferocity of the battle. I watched as APC drivers, in desperation, rammed Soviet tanks broadside. A testament to the sheer will of our men to survive and win. SS Corporal Erhard Knöfel of No. 11 Company described how Grill self-propelled guns played a critical role. Limpet charges worked, but some failed in the confusion. 2 Lieutenant Wolf smashed Soviet tanks up close. Our grills and self-propelled guns fired from the anti-tank ditch, their direct hits causing entire turrets to fly into the air. I was shot through the thigh while applying a dressing to a wounded comrade. I removed my pistol belt, slapped on an emergency bandage, and crawled to safety. When I found cover in a trench, I was startled to see 2 Soviet tank crewmen staring back at me, unarmed and terrified. Piper later praised SS Captain Paul Gould, one of the many outstanding leaders in the battle. At the height of the battle, Gould, despite sustained heavy fire, personally organised defences, rallied close combat teams, and retrieved ammunition from burning vehicles. Even after being wounded, he continued to lead his men. His counterattack helped restore our original front line. Among the many heroes of Piper's APC battalion, SS Senior Sergeant Adolf Sellmeyer destroyed 2 T-34s using limpet mines, while 19-year-old pioneer Helmuth Kohler climbed onto 2 T-34s and destroyed them with explosive charges. Even a medical orderly from No. 7 Company eliminated a Soviet tank. By the evening of July 12, 1943, the battlefield was littered with 148 destroyed Soviet tanks. The largest tank battle in history had ended, but the cost of victory was immense. The Soviets had suffered catastrophic losses, yet the Germans had been forced into a defensive posture. The war on the Eastern Front had entered a new and brutal phase. On July 12, 1943, as the largest tank battle in history raged at Prokhorovka, the Leibstandartes Panzer Grenadiers and armoured units fought desperately to hold their positions. SS Lieutenant Rudolf von Ribbentrop, son of the German foreign minister, personally destroyed 14 Soviet tanks that day, earning him the Knight's Cross on July 15, 1943. His platoon leader, SS Lieutenant Walter Malchow, accounted for 7 more tank kills. Despite their overwhelming numbers, the Soviet tank brigades suffered catastrophic losses, with Panzer Grenadiers using close combat weapons to knock out Soviet tanks that broke through German lines. SS Lieutenant Colonel Krass, commanding the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, was wounded under his right eye by a shell splinter, yet his regiment alone destroyed 143 Soviet tanks in close combat. By the end of the day, the Leibstandarte had wiped out a total of 192 Russian tanks. During the battle, No. 14 Company supply unit had remained at Klenovoy. The village mayor's daughter took it upon herself to lay flowers on the graves of the fallen German soldiers buried there, visiting the small cemetery daily to read their names, some of whom she had known personally. By July 17, 1943, as the Leibstandarte was pulled from the front lines, the armoured group reassembled west of Teterovino. SS2 / Lieutenant Erhard Goers, reflecting on their last days in battle, wrote, "When we were relieved 4 days later, I had 15 dead and more than 35 wounded. Hannes Duffert fell on the last morning, and Corporal Kamprad, my company troop leader, was seriously wounded. As for me, my guardian angel must have been watching over me. On July 13th, I temporarily lost hearing in my left ear. My eardrum ruptured from the intense artillery barrages. I had minor cuts on my neck from earlier wounds. I later heard that Corporal Lorenz was dead. I saw him stretched out after the battle. These were grim days, but they were also filled with proud victories. We fought with everything we had. We cut ourselves off from the enemy, and for a while, no one knew where we had gone. For 2 days, we had peace and quiet, but looking at my men, I realized how much they had aged in just 12 days of fighting. Despite the intense combat, none of the 6 Grill's self-propelled guns in the unit had been destroyed by enemy fire, though they sustained heavy damage from artillery and shrapnel. The Grill had proven its effectiveness, providing crucial fire support during the tank battles. On July 17, 1943, Goers was awarded the Iron Cross First Class from Jochen Piper himself, and was given command of No. 13 Company. Captain Dinser was scheduled to take over his old company once he returned from leave. That night, on July 18, 1943, the battalion set off again for the area west of Bilgorod. It was rumoured that they were bound for Stalino. The 12-day Battle of Kursk had come to an end, and with it the hopes of the German army for a decisive victory on the Eastern Front. As a personal mark of his achievements, Gurs painted 2 thick white rings and a silhouette of a T-34 on the barrel of his grille, commemorating the 2 tanks he had destroyed, one on July 12th at Prokhorovka and the other on July 13th in the defence of Hill 252.2. For his actions, he was awarded his 31st 32nd Close Combat Days. At just 21 years old, Gurs had been wounded 5 times, fought in 4 close combat days under relentless Soviet shellfire, and, despite lacking a working gun sight or rangefinder, had personally destroyed 2 Soviet tanks. However, his wounds had taken their toll. His right hand, injured earlier, became infected with blood poisoning. The condition worsened rapidly, and on July 17, 1943, he was flown to Kharkov in a Ju-52 transport plane. Even in evacuation, danger lurked. The aircraft was targeted by Soviet anti-aircraft fire, tracer rounds streaking toward the plane as he watched from a window. At the military hospital in Kharkov, he encountered SS Lieutenant Georg Preuss, still recovering from the submachine gun bullet that had passed through his neck. 2 years on the Eastern Front had taken their toll. In 1941, he had served as an MG gunner. In 1943, he manned an MG on an APC during the battles around Kharkov. At Kursk, he had been the gunner on a grill during the largest tank battle in history. He had fought side by side with Piper's battalion, contributing to the successes of the Leibstandarte's armoured group. And yet, despite everything, despite his valour, wounds, and experience, he received neither an Iron Cross First Class nor a promotion in the Leibstandarte. While in the Kharkov military hospital, Gurs witnessed the loyalty and determination of the Waffen-SS firsthand. One day, 2 Lieutenant Konrad Nickel entered the hospital ward, calling out names from a list of patients. He informed them that anyone wishing to return to the Leibstandarte had to leave the hospital immediately. "There is a transport train leaving for Italy tonight. If you don't board it, you will never return to the old heap." Without waiting for discharge papers or official orders, Gurs and several others snuck out of the hospital, heading to a prearranged meeting point in Kharkov. An SS lieutenant led them to the train, and by July 24, 1943, they had reached the Field Convalescence Company, a Field Reserve Battalion. By July 30, 1943, they boarded the train bound for Italy. During the journey, the train passed through Upper Silesia, where SS Captain Robert Artika arranged a leave pass for Gurs. On August 4, 1943, he finally returned home on leave. Meanwhile, his battalion had departed from Belgorod, travelling on the Lightning Arrow transport train. On July 29, 1943, Gurs recorded his final entry before departure. At 300 hours, we began loading, and by 8:38 hours, the train left the station. A strange feeling settled over me. This time, I had left so many good men behind. Corporal Kamprad and Bachmann had succumbed to their wounds. Where Duffert and Dreyer were buried was now back in Russian hands. I asked myself one question. Why had I survived? During the Kursk offensive, the Americans landed in Sicily on July 10, 1943, worsening Italy's situation. The Italian army was demoralised, and its defection from the Axis seemed imminent. This development placed the German southern front in great danger. To maintain control in northern Italy, the Leibstandarte was ordered to move from Innsbruck through South Tyrol into northern Italy, securing the Brenner-Verona highway and preparing to disarm Italian units in the Po Valley once Italy surrendered. On August 2, 1943, the first Leibstandarte transport trains arrived in Innsbruck, with elements of the division reaching Trento on August 2nd and 3rd. On the night of August 4th, No. 13th Company of the APC Battalion unloaded at Innsbruck. SS2/Lieutenant Erhard Gurs, reflecting on the journey, wrote in his diary, "A wonderful journey, 5 days of perfect weather without incident. But yesterday another train car nearly caught fire. The bombed out people from Hamburg tell us that our once beautiful city is now a heap of rubble. The weight of these thoughts presses on us as we prepare for the next operation. Perhaps this is the right mindset for fighting the British and Americans. The scenery here is breathtaking. We are in a valley between 2 towering mountains surrounded by a landscape of incredible beauty. Transporting a fully equipped Panzer division by rail while ensuring a coordinated unloading at the destination was a logistical triumph. On August 5th, Piper led the wheeled elements of his battalion from Innsbruck over the Brenner Pass via Brixen and Bolzano to Trento, handling transport logistics upon arrival. The local population greeted them with enthusiasm, offering wine and fruit in abundance. On August 7th, 1943, Piper's battalion adjutant, SS 2 Elter Werner Wolf, was awarded the Knight's Cross for his bravery at Prokhorovka on July 12th. At 20 years old, Wolf was the youngest officer in the battalion and held Piper in the highest regard, idolizing him with youthful admiration. Piper himself had received the Tank Destruction Badge on July 21st, and Wolf, along with other close combat tank destroyers from Operation Citadel, including SS leading grenadiers Günther Vogel and Erich Jost, were also decorated. On August 13th, 1943, the APC battalion reached Trento and was ordered to move west of Verona the next day. The Leibstandarte was tasked with supporting the 44th Infantry Division in the Brenner sector if necessary. On August 19th, the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment was transferred to Reggio Emilia, South Polodenza and Scandiano. For the weary Leibstandarte troops, this move to Italy provided a welcome respite from the grueling conditions of the Eastern Front. In Mondovì, Piper arranged for his men to take joyrides in an Italian aircraft. Contact with local officials was quickly established, and the mayor of Mondovì invited SSLT Hans Schmidt and several officers to a formal dinner. On August 28th, the APC battalion held a festival, and 2 days later, on August 30th, they competed against German army units in a sports day event where Werner Wolf excelled in boxing and sabre fencing. That same month, the battalion conducted a ceremonial march through Reggio Emilia, led by Piper, Wolf and Paul Gould, 3 abreast. This impressive display was filmed for the weekly newsreels and recorded for a radio broadcast. SS Sergeant Rudi Vieten, now in command of Goerz's Grill Platoon, had recently been awarded the Iron Cross First Class after being transferred from No. 12 Company to No. 14 Company. On September 1st, 1943, the first close combat clasps were awarded in the Leibstandarte. Upon returning from leave on September 17th, Goerz received his bronze close combat clasp along with SS leading grenadiers Erich Jost and Tony Motzheim and SS Grenadier Willy Pluschke of the Pioneer Platoon. The clasps had originally been scheduled for distribution on April 12th, 1943, but administrative delays postponed them until now. Only during the lull in Italy did unit leaders find the time to properly document combat records. Among those awarded the bronze close combat clasp were Wolf, Preuss, Goerz and Gould. For their actions at Kharkov, Otto Dinsi, then battalion adjutant, and the former commanders of Nosvin 12, 13 and 14 companies, Bormann, Pinter and Kolitz, also received the clasp. In total, 178 officers and men in the battalion were decorated. Despite some having surpassed the 15 combat days required for the silver clasp, only the bronze version was issued at that time. Goerz himself had survived 32 confirmed close combat days, as had SS leading grenadier Paul Zwigart of No. 11th Company. Piper was awarded the silver close combat clasp. On September 16th, 1943, Goerz's new company commander, SS Lieutenant Otto Dinser, received the Iron Cross First Class for his service as adjutant during the Kharkov operation. Similar awards were given to SS Sergeant Wilhelm Hafer-Stroh of the Pioneer Platoon and tank hunters Erich Jost and Günther Vogel. SS Corporal Willy Mewes, a tank gunner who had been wounded, was sent on leave and later awarded the Iron Cross First Class 10 months later. Additionally, 78 NCOs and soldiers received the Iron Cross Second Class. SS Captain Paul Gull attended a battalion officers course at the Panzer School in Versailles from September 13th to October 9th, 1943. In his absence, SS Lieutenant Hans Schmidt took temporary command of No. 11th Company. On the morning of September 8, 1943, King Victor Emmanuel III assured German envoy Dr. Rudolf Rahn that Italy would remain loyal to Germany. However, by that afternoon, Rahn received word from the Italian Foreign Ministry that Marshal Badoglio had surrendered unconditionally to the Allies. The royal family, Badoglio, and key government officials fled Rome, boarding an Italian warship bound for Allied-controlled territory in southern Italy. This betrayal, long anticipated by Hitler, now forced the German army to defend Italy alone. At 1800 hours on September 8, 1943, the Leibstandarte divisional staff was informed of Italy's defection. 2nd Panzer Corps, was placed on high alert. By 0100 hours on September 9th, Leibstandarte units arrived at Italian barracks, demanding their immediate surrender. Within minutes, Piper's APC battalion was ordered to reinforce the Panther Group at Reggio. By 0155 hours, the battalion occupied key positions, including post offices and railway stations, and disarmed Italian forces. By 0500 hours, the artillery barracks at Reggio had surrendered. Piper swiftly reported the mission accomplished and returned to the standby area. In Verona, the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment and the self-propelled artillery group disarmed the Italian garrison, while in Cremona, the 1st and 3rd battalions took 650 officers and 16,599 men prisoner. The Italian soldiers were given a choice: return to civilian life or enlist in the Wehrmacht as auxiliaries. Martial law was declared throughout the region. Piper's battalion moved from Reggio to Alessandria and Asti, where they disarmed Italian forces without resistance. The 2nd Battalion, 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment occupied Turin, while 1st Regiment reached Milan. In Turin, 106,046 Italians were taken prisoner, along with 428 motorcycles, 38,591 rifles, 391 aircraft, and 27 tanks. The disarmament process continued, but Germany was now fighting without its former ally. Leaving for the transports on October 24, 1943, Piper's battalion was placed under the command of the Panzer Regiment, and on October 26, the first elements of the battalion loaded at Alessandria. The soldiers had been issued winter gear, consisting of thick, fur-lined anoraks with large hoods, reversible grey and white padded trousers, leather boots with felt lining, fur-lined gloves, and insulated head protectors. Since their departure, the situation on the Eastern Front had worsened significantly. By mid-October 1943, General Konev's 2nd Ukrainian Front had established 3 bridgeheads east of Kremenchug over the Dnieper River. Dnipropetrovsk fell on October 25, 1943, and Soviet forces were now pushing toward the industrial hub of Kryvyi Rih. In response, von Manstein's 1st Panzer Army launched a counteroffensive to halt Konev's advance. Meanwhile, in the south, Melitopol had been lost to the Soviets, putting the Crimean Narrows at Prokhorovka in jeopardy. On November 3, 1943, the 1st Ukrainian Front under General Vatutin amassed 30 infantry divisions, 24 tank brigades, and 10 motorized infantry brigades around Kiev. This massive offensive led to the fall of Kiev on November 6th. The railway marshalling yards at Fastov, 60 kilometers west of Kiev, fell on November 7th, which was a critical logistical hub for the LSSAH to unload its transport trains. By November 11th, Soviet forces reached Radomyshl on the Taterev River, and on November 13th they recaptured Zhytomyr. To prevent the northern flank of Army Group South from being cut off, urgent reinforcements were needed. The 1st SS Panzer Division LSSAH and the 1st Panzer Division were ordered to support the northern flank. Soviet vanguard units were already engaging LSSAH forces, even as they were unloading from their transport trains. Grill Platoon Commander SS Sergeant Rudy Vieten requested Gurs as a gun captain, but since the unit was short of loaders, he first served temporarily as a loader until a position as a gun commander became available. By November 14th, the HQ, No. 11 and No. 12 companies of Piper's battalion had yet to arrive, but No. 13 company had already been forced into battle immediately upon unloading. On November 15th, the Leibstandarte advanced north toward the Kiev-Zhytomyr highway, with the 1st Panzer Division on the left flank and the 25th Panzer Division and 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich covering the right. That same day, No. 14 Company was reinforced by units from Panzer Group Dainz. On November 16th, the 1st SS Panzer Reconnaissance Section seized the villages of Turbovka and Divin, while the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment took Wilnia. Panzer Group Dinse repelled Soviet attacks at Lisovka and Moshorino. The following day, the APC battalion conducted a reconnaissance mission from Turbovka to Lutchin, and No. 14 Company, supported by 10 Tigers of No. 13th Panzer Company under SS Captain Kling and a platoon of pioneer armour, assaulted Lutchin at 15:40 hours. After a 90-minute battle against 5 T-34s, Lutchin was secured. On the night of November 18th, Soviet forces launched a battalion-sized counterattack from Fedorovka against Luchin, which was successfully repelled. However, on November 19th, a larger Soviet force pushed Battle Group Dints into the western sector of Luchin. Soon after, an entire Soviet regiment attempted to bypass Luchin to the north, threatening Leibstandarte's flank. During the two-day battle for Luchin, Panzer Group Dints Kling destroyed 13 T-34s, 25 anti-tank guns, a 127mm field gun, several light anti-tank guns, lorries, and tow tractors. For his participation, Gers was credited with his 33rd and 34th close combat days on November the 17th and 18th, and his 35th on November 19. On the night of November 20th, after being relieved from Luchin, Kornin and Divin, the Leibstandarte advanced along the Morozovka-Wodoti-Brusilov line. By 15:30 hours on November 19th, Piper reported that the remainder of his battalion had arrived at Bila Tserkva. At 0100 hours on November 20th, the reinforced 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, along with the 2nd Battalion of the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, launched an advance along the Wodoti-Brusilov road. The Panther Group reached Piliponka-Privoroti, and the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment was ordered to join them. The planned assault on Brusilov was cancelled. Instead, Piper awarded the Iron Cross First Class to SS Grenadier Tony Motzheim of the Pioneer Platoon, number 14 Company and number 13 Company Medical Orderly SS Corporal Rudi Jentsch. Additionally, 17 men received the Iron Cross Second Class. At midday on November 20th, SS Lieutenant Colonel Schoenberger, commander of the Panzer Regiment, was killed at Solovyevka after being struck by artillery shell splinters while outside his tank. In response, Divisional Commander SS Colonel Theodor Wisch appointed Piper as the new commander of the regiment. This was a significant challenge for Piper, as it meant leaving the APC battalion, which he had led for over a year. He had transformed it from a standard infantry battalion into an armoured unit, and had seen extraordinary success in its operations. Reflecting on his time in command, Piper wrote, "With its expansion, successes, and quite unique vitality, I have always considered the APC battalion as the high point and fulfillment of my career as a soldier. I felt deeply connected to it more than with any other unit." Though Piper now commanded the division's entire armoured group, the APC battalion remained under his tactical control, but he officially passed command of the battalion to SS Captain Paul Gould, former commander of No. 11th Company. On November 21st, the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment launched an assault on Brusilov from the south, but met fierce Soviet resistance and had to withdraw at midday. A night attack was planned instead. During the advance, the Grill platoon moved past a burning village and encountered a well-defended Soviet anti-tank position on a nearby hill. In the ensuing firefight, the Grill, commanded by SS leading grenadier Otto Brockmann, was struck and set ablaze. Brockmann was killed in action. The battle intensified, with German forces attempting to break through the enemy's defensive lines under the cover of darkness. By the end of November 22nd, the Leibstandarte was engaged in constant counterattacks to prevent the Soviet breakthrough from expanding further westward. The battle for the Kiev-Zhytomyr corridor had only just begun. On March 13th, following the burial of Bydke, the company was loaded for transport. SS Untersturmführer Neff assumed command, and the unit was loaded in Novo-Ukrainka. The transport departed at 2000 hours, heading toward Krivoye Ozero. As the Totenkopf division neared Balta, the unloading zone was designated as Savronka. The next day, the Tiger Company arrived in Pomichna, but came under attack from Soviet aircraft during transport, wounding several soldiers. In Novo-Ukrainka, 12 trucks from the company's logistics units began a road march, but after covering 40 kilometers, some trucks became stuck in the mud. SS Rottenführer Kurt Heller, driving an 18-ton recovery vehicle ZGKW, assisted in towing the stranded trucks, later receiving a commendation for his efforts. The vehicle column regrouped in Pervomaisk, and by March 15th, the company was redirected to Balta and fully unloaded by March 16th. On March 18th, the tank regiment assembled west of Balta, though some of Totenkopf's wheeled elements were still struggling to reach the sector. On March 19th, SS Panzer Regiment 3 advanced to Perema, engaging in counterattacks alongside SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike near Lubomirka. By March 22nd, Soviet forces launched a major assault from Perwomaisk, forcing German units to retreat across the Bug River. On March 24th, Soviet troops attacked Lesnitschewka, pushing elements of Totenkopf back to the northern edge of Balta. Kampfgruppe Pichelis, with 2 Tiger tanks, provided rearguard support. During this period, the 26th Guards Rifle Corps claimed 2 German armoured half-tracks (SPW) and 1 self-propelled gun destroyed in combat with Totenkopf. On March 25th, Kampfgruppe Pichelis defended the eastern edge of Balta, launching a counterattack that forced the Soviets to retreat toward Benzari. On March 25th, SS Untersturmführer Neff ordered all non-essential personnel, including the Bergezug recovery platoon, the Instandstaffel repair unit, and 7 Tiger tanks undergoing maintenance, to be transported by rail to Romania. The train moved south via Katowsk, passing through Wesley Kut, Novoborisivka, before halting at Rozdilna. A second rail transport departed Wesley Kut at 14:35 on April 2nd, carrying 1 Tiger tank, 1 Befehlspanzer III command tank, and 1 Panzerbeobachtungswagen III artillery observer tank. Meanwhile, Neff retained command of the remaining 3 operational Tigers, which were grouped under Panzergruppe Neff. These 3 tanks, commanded by Neff SS Oberscharführer Weitner and SS Oberscharführer Tongers, continued rearguard actions. The remaining 20 personnel later fought as infantry, integrating with Wehrmacht units during the retreat from Balta. On March 26th, Soviet forces attacked Balta from the southern edge but were repelled. On March 27th, another Soviet assault was launched on the northwestern edge of Balta. A counterattack led by 200 men and 3 Tiger tanks at 1800 hours forced the 80th 1st Guards Rifle Regiment, 25th Guards Rifle Division, to withdraw, though 1 Tiger was captured intact by the Soviets. At this time, German vehicle convoys desperately tried to escape from Balta, but Soviet forces temporarily cut off the rail line to Kotovsk, preventing German transports from moving. The Soviet 26th Guards Rifle Corps reported capturing a train carrying 3 tanks and destroying 1 armoured half-track SPW, while the 25th Guards Rifle Division claimed 2 more tanks and 2 SPWs destroyed. On March 28th, Soviet forces captured Balta's main rail station, seizing a German train with 5 tanks and 2 Hummel self-propelled artillery guns from ISS Panzer Artillery Regiment 3. In northern Balta, Soviet troops found 4 abandoned German tanks and 8 trucks, all left behind due to fuel shortages. That day, 1 Tiger was lost to Soviet anti-tank fire, and the 2 remaining Tigers, under Neff and Weitner, retreated south of Balta. By March 29th, Soviet forces had seized an enormous amount of abandoned German equipment. The 94th Guards Rifle Division and 26th Guards Rifle Corps reported capturing 21 self-propelled guns, various models, and 30 tanks, none operational. On March 30th, the Red Army advanced into Balta's southern suburbs, discovering another abandoned Tiger tank that had run out of fuel. 1 kilometre south of Balta's rail station, the 94th Guards Rifle Division found a train carrying 22 tanks from 2 SS Panzer Regiment 3. Meanwhile, elements of SS Panzer Regiment 3 reached Katowsk, where they boarded trains for evacuation. The direction of travel was Wesley Kut and Rozdilna. As the division retreated, soldiers without tanks followed Totenkopf's main body toward Dubosary. On April 2nd, 9th Company personnel arrived in Dubosary, later reaching Chisinau on April 3rd. The company rested in the city for 5 to 6 days before receiving orders to move to Lapusna on April 10th. On April 11, Totenkopf regrouped in Negresti, then moved toward Husi Vaslui Krasna for rail transport to Bakau and Roman. By April 12th, SS Panzer Regiment 3 assembled in Krasna, preparing for rail transport out of the combat zone. However, German units faced delays due to Romanian authorities, who were slow to fulfill transportation requests. Despite this, the first rail transport departed on April 13th, marking the final evacuation of Totenkopf's remaining armoured elements. On April 2nd, 1944, the transport carrying 7 Tigers from 9th Company was brought to a halt in the town of Rozdilna, along with 30 other rail transports. The rail line leading to Tiraspol from Rozdilna was a single track, which significantly delayed movement. As the situation became increasingly desperate, a German army officer from the General Staff approached Neff at the Rozdilna rail station and ordered him to destroy his remaining Tigers, as the Soviets were advancing rapidly. Erich Lehmkuhl later recalled this moment, describing how the remnants of the tank regiment had been waiting for rail transport toward Tiraspol when they were forced to a standstill alongside numerous other German units. Hopes that the transport carrying the Tigers would be prioritized for movement to Tiraspol were dashed, and with the advance of Soviet forces, the order was given to destroy the remaining Tigers to prevent their capture. The crews scavenged what supplies they could from other transports of their equipment, ammunition, and weapons. Once the storm passed, the march resumed, with the soldiers encountering countless German vehicles bogged down in the mud, many of which had to be destroyed with hand grenades to prevent Soviet use. With little choice, the men had to abandon many of their personal belongings, keeping only the bare essentials. Some attempted to hitch rides on the few remaining operational vehicles, but these were scarce. At night, the retreating column took shelter in barns and haystacks, always aware of the ever-approaching Red Army. The following day, their column was scattered when a group of Soviet tanks made contact, forcing them to defend themselves with machine gun fire. Eventually, the remnants reached Tiraspol, where they were gathered by the military police and assigned to alarm groups for use in infantry Kampfgruppen. By a stroke of luck, the men of the 9th Company were allowed to pass through, where they found that their unit had established a reporting centre for its scattered personnel. The surviving soldiers were assembled and transported by rail from Tiraspol to Chisinau, and from there they were transferred to Bacău. During this time, SS man Werner They arrived in Bacău on April 14th. On April 17th, the army vehicle officer in Chisinau informed Totenkopf that a new allocation of specialist tools for Tiger tank repairs had arrived by air and could be collected from maintenance stores in Chisinau. However, the regiment had no tanks at this point. Throughout April 1944, there were plans to integrate 9th Company into the newly forming 3rd Company of Heavy SS Panzer Detachment 102, but this order was later rescinded by Hitler, who insisted that the company remain part of SS Panzer Regiment 3. As a result, Heavy SS Panzer Abteilung 102 was instead reinforced by personnel from Schwer SS Panzer Abteilung 103 in May 1944. On April 14th, 9th Company personnel arrived in Bacău by rail from Krasna and were quartered in a hotel in the centre of town. By the end of the month, a tank recovery and collection team was assembled. On April 30th, SS Untersturmführer Neff was placed in command of a 50-man team, and on May 1st, they were flown to Belgrade via Ju-90 aircraft, preparing for rail transport to HZA Magdeburg. On May 2nd, 2 transports carrying 8 newly allocated Tiger Y tanks were loaded. The first of these transports, carrying 4 Tigers, arrived in Bacău on May 6 but was immediately forwarded to Roman, where it was unloaded 2 hours later. From there, the 4 Tigers were deployed near Târgu Frumos, where they remained until May 10th. During this period, from May 8th to May 10th, the Tigers endured repeated airstrikes from Soviet ground attack aircraft, though they suffered no casualties or vehicle losses. On May 11th, the Tigers withdrew to a nearby village for necessary maintenance. By May 12th, they moved into new positions along the Balatati-Jassi road. During the night of May 13th to 14th, one of the Tigers claimed a Soviet night bomber shot down. Meanwhile, the second transport, carrying the remaining 4 Tigers, encountered significant delays due to heavy damage to the rail infrastructure from Allied bombing raids in Siebenbürgen, Transylvania. This transport was stranded in the village of Gross Shogun, Nagisajo, for several days. After a series of intense RAF bombing raids on May 19th, the second transport finally arrived in Bacău but was soon redirected to Roman, where the tanks were unloaded on May 20th. On April 2nd, 1944, the transport carrying 7 Tigers from 9th Company was halted in Rozdilna, along with 30 other rail transports. The single-track rail line to Tiraspol caused delays, and as Soviet forces advanced, a German Army General Staff officer approached Neff, ordering him to destroy the remaining Tigers to prevent their capture. Erich Lemkuhl recalled the moment, stating that the remnants of the tank regiment were waiting for transport to Tiraspol when they were suddenly ordered to destroy their tanks. The crews had hoped their transport would be prioritized, but as the situation worsened, they had to scavenge supplies from other trains before retreating westward on foot. Adding to their hardship, a snowstorm struck, forcing the men to halt under the weight of their gear. As they continued, they encountered numerous German vehicles stuck in the mud, many of which had to be destroyed with hand grenades to prevent Soviet use. The retreat was chaotic, with soldiers attempting to hitch rides on rare operational vehicles. They slept in barns and haystacks, constantly aware of the looming Soviet advance. The next day, their column was scattered when a small Soviet tank group attacked, forcing them to respond with machine gun fire. Eventually, they reached Tiraspol, where military police were gathering retreating troops into ad hoc infantry Kampfgruppen. Fortunately, the 9th Company had established a reporting centre for its personnel, and after regrouping, the men were transported by rail from Tiraspol to Chisinau, then to Bacău. During this period, SS man Werner from the Instandstaffel was sentenced to 14 days of hard labour for attempting to barter his pistol for food. Meanwhile, the 2nd SS Panzer Regiment 3 and its headquarters company arrived in Krasna on April 12th, waiting until the 13th for transport. They reached Bacău on April 14th. On April 17th, the army vehicle officer in Chisinau informed Totenkopf that a new allocation of specialized Tiger repair tools had arrived by air. However, the regiment had no tanks at the time. Initially, plans were made to integrate the 9th Company into the newly forming 3rd Company of Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 102, but Hitler reversed this decision, keeping the company within SS Panzer Regiment 3. Consequently, Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 102 was reinforced by personnel from Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 103 in May 1944. By April 14th, 9th Company personnel arrived in Bacău and were quartered in a hotel. On April 30th, a new tank collection team was formed under SS Untersturmführer Neff, consisting of 50 men. On May 1st, they were flown to Belgrade via U-90 transport aircraft, preparing for rail transport to HZA Magdeburg. On May 2nd, 2 transports carrying 8 Tiger WAM tanks were loaded. The first transport carrying 4 Tigers arrived in Bacău on May 6th, but was immediately redirected to Roman, where it was unloaded after a 2-hour process. The tanks were then deployed near Târgu Frumos, remaining there until May 10th. Between May 8th and May 10th, Soviet ground attack aircraft launched multiple airstrikes against the Tigers, though no losses or casualties were reported. On May 11th, the Tigers withdrew to a village for maintenance, and by May 12th, they had taken up new positions along the Balatati-Iasi road. During the night of May 13th to 14th, 1 Soviet night bomber was reportedly shot down by the company. Meanwhile, the second transport carrying 4 more Tigers was severely delayed due to extensive Allied bombing of the rail network in Siebenbürgen, Transylvania. The transport was stranded in Gross-Schogen, Nagisaijo, before finally arriving in Bacău on May 19th. However, it was soon redirected to Roman, where the tanks were unloaded on May 19th-20. Lemkul later recounted how the journey had taken 14 days, with the Pentecostal festival spent in a Volksdeutsche village due to British bombing damage along the railway. Upon arrival, the new Tigers were immediately deployed around Jassi and Târgu Frumos. Another collection team took 14 days to return with 6 additional Tigers from Germany. Until late June, the company command post remained in Bacău, but due to worsening conditions, they were loaded onto rail transports in Roman on July 7th, moving towards southern Poland, passing through Radom and Warsaw before unloading in Osowicz for deployment in the Grodno region. On May 31st, SS Panzer Regiment 3 formed a quick reaction force near Târgu Frumos, consisting of 24 Panzer IV and 2 Tigers. On June 7th, 57 Panzer Corps ordered the division to form a Panzergruppe along the Iasi road. Commanded by SS Sturmbannführer Lachmann, it comprised 12 Panzer IVs, 8 Tigers, and support from 3rd Battalion SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 5 Totenkopf. The Panzergruppe moved into position near Podol Iloi at 0200 hours and was placed under the command of 24th Panzer Division on June 8th. The remaining tanks from SS Panzer Regiment 3, totaling 13, were placed under SS Sturmbannführer Bayermeier and held in reserve. On June 8th, the Panzergruppe engaged Soviet forces at Hill 177.0 and the heights northwest of Damian. This continued on June 9th. On June 10th, the Panzergruppe secured Hill 176.0, holding it until June 11th, before the Tigers were recalled on June 13th. The Panzer IVs returned to divisional control on June 15th. Throughout the battle, the Werkstatt Company for SS Panzer Regiment 3 operated from a forest 5 kilometers east of Roman. On May 15th, another collection team of 30 men departed for HZA Magdeburg, leaving Germany on May 17th with 6 Tigers from Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 103. They arrived in Bacău on May 31st, with 6 more Tigers reaching Bacău on June 7th. 2 of these were allocated to 9th Company, but on June 11th, Army Group South ordered Totenkopf to transfer them to Panzer Regiment Grossdeutschland. The transfer was completed the same day. On July 7th, as Totenkopf prepared for redeployment to Army Group Center, the last tank collection team under SS Hauptscharführer Berger left Romania for Germany to collect 5 more Tigers. These tanks departed HZA Magdeburg on July 26th and reached Warsaw on July 31st, just before the outbreak of the Polish Home Army uprising. The original plan had been for this transport to unload in Lokau. In personnel changes on May 5th, SS Untersturmführer Wenzel joined the company from SS Panzer Ausbildungs- und Ersatzregiment in Sennelager, taking command of the 2nd Platoon. Wenzel had been promoted to Untersturmführer on March 1st while serving as an instructor at Panzer Truppenschule Putlos. The 1st Platoon was commanded by SS Untersturmführer Hans Kriescher, who had joined the 9th Company on November 10th, 1943, after completing the 1st SS Panzer Junker Sonderlehrgang from August 16th to November 6, 1943. He was promoted to Untersturmführer on March 1st, 1944. The 3rd Platoon was under SS Untersturmführer Helmut Neff, who was also acting company commander at the time. Neff had originally enlisted in the Luftwaffe in 1937 and had attained the rank of Feldwebel before transferring to the Waffen-SS on February 11th, 1943, with the rank of Oberscharführer. He underwent officer training and was promoted to Untersturmführer on October 1st, joining 9th Company in November 1943. SS Hauptsturmführer Hans Fischer was nominated as company commander on March 20th, 1944, but was only officially confirmed on March 31st. He finally joined the company on July 18th after previously acting as the commander of Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 102 in March. During May 1944, the company's support units remained in Bacau, with the Werkstatt platoon being fully integrated into the regiment's Werkstatt company. The remaining support elements included the Instandstaffel, led by SS Oberscharführer Henke, the Bergezug, led by SS Oberscharführer Bauer, and the Nachschubzug, supply platoon. On May 10th, the Panzer Inspectorate requested that 9th Company be strengthened to 125 men, and on May 11th, that it be allocated 10 new Tigers. On April 15th, 1944, SS Sturmgeschütze Abteilung 3 was stationed in the village of Parinsea for refitting under the command of SS Sturmbannführer Pichelis. At the time, the battalion had only 2 Stug assault guns and 2 self-propelled anti-tank guns, Paik SFL. However, on April 28th, the battalion received an additional 8 Stugs from Sturmgeschütze Brigade 228 of the German Army. A further 17 Stugs were transferred on May 5th, followed by another 9 Stugs on May 6th from the same brigade. On May 8th, 6 more Stugs were delivered and unloaded in Roman, while another 3 were transferred from 46th Infantry Division on June 10th. An additional Stug was received on June 18th, after which the battalion rejoined the front line. By July 1st, SS Sturmgeschütze Abteilung 3 was ordered to transfer 17 Stugs to TOE SS Panzer Regiment 3, forming the new 8th Company. The battalion was subsequently redesignated as SS Panzerjäger Abteilung 3, now structured with 30 Stug 3 assault guns, 2 in the headquarters company, and 14 each in the 2nd and 3rd Companies, 2 Schwerpaket SFL and 4 heavy anti-tank guns assigned to 1st Company. On May 12th, the battalion deployed a single company under SS Obersturmbannführer Müller toward Oberoseni, and on May 26th, elements relieved Sturmgeschütze Brigade 228, which had been supporting the Romanian Brigade Opris. Another company with 8 Stugs was deployed on June 23rd, attached to the Romanian Guards Brigade, before returning to divisional control on July 1st. By July 1st, SS Panzer Regiment 3 fielded 28 Panzer Vs, 17 Stug 3 assault guns, and 15 Tigers. Additionally, a new allocation of 17 Panzer Vs, 2 Panzer Beobachtungswagen Vs, 5 Tigers, and 4 Stugs had been received. During July 1944, ISS Panzer Regiment 3 completed its refitting process, being issued 78 Panther tanks, along with 4 replacement Panthers that arrived on July 31st. On August 6th, 1st Company of SS Panzerjäger Abteilung 3 was sent to Poland for conversion to Panzerjäger 4 tank destroyers. On September 5th, the company was issued 21 Jagdpanzer IVs at Troop Training Grounds Mielau and rejoined the division on September 15th. By July 6th, The 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf received orders for redeployment from Romania to Poland. Army Group Center was suffering under Operation Bagrashion, a massive Soviet offensive launched on June 22nd by the 1st Baltic, 1st Belarusian, 2nd Belarusian, and 3rd Belarusian fronts. The 9th Company was loaded onto rail transports in Roman on July 7th, travelling through Warsaw before unloading in Osowiec on July 16th, where Totenkopf was placed under the command of AOK-4. After unloading, 9th Company assembled in Miloskovce, southwest of Kuznica. On July 17th, the company was attached to Kampfgruppe Caen, tasked with stopping a Soviet advance. Alongside another Kampfgruppe, it engaged enemy forces near Adamovice, supporting 3rd Battalion SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike. 2 kilometers north, near Mickiewicz, ISS Polizei Regiment 34 was deployed, with both units attempting to eliminate the Soviet bridgehead near Zarzyczach. Throughout the day, Kampfgruppen advances made gains, with 3rd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike and 9th Company's Tigers heavily engaged in fighting around Adamovice. During the battle, SS Untersturmführer Wenzel's Tiger was hit and immobilized. His crew was dragged from the tank and executed by Soviet troops, with only the radio operator SS Rottenführer Heinz Rudolf spared as a prisoner of war. The executed crew members included SS Unterscharführer Siebenaler, driver, SS Sturmann Lau, gunner, and SS Sturmann Metzger, loader. Meanwhile, ISS Polizei Regiment 34 successfully entered Mickiewicz by nightfall. On July 18th, Soviet forces launched an assault on Hill 67 near Adamovice. In response, 3rd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike withdrew in coordination with Corps von Gottberg, while Kampfgruppe Caen attempted to retake Adamovice, sending reinforcements to ISI/SS Polizei Regiment 34. The Tigers of 9th Company provided covering fire near Kilbaski, supporting an attack led by IY/SS Polizei Regiment 34 and 15 Stu Gs. During the operation, Company Commander SS Hauptsturmführer Fischer was fatally wounded. While assisting SS Unterscharführer Schultz's damaged Tiger, Fischer's own Tiger was mistakenly fired upon by an anti-tank gun from SS Polizei Regiment 34, wounding Fischer and his driver, SS Unterscharführer Argus Gjott. Fischer succumbed to his injuries on July 20th in Leuki, and command of 9th Company was transferred to SS Hauptsturmführer Neidhardt, formerly of 7th Company. On July 19th, 9th Company and 3rd Company/SS Panzer Aufklärungsabteilung 3 advanced towards Sopocchini, encountering heavy Soviet resistance. Their attack was coordinated with SS Kampfgruppe Pichelis, led by Pichelis, the commander of SS Panzerjägerabteilung 3. The fighting resulted in casualties, including the death of SS Sturmann Heinz Bartel, vehicle driver, and the wounding of Josef Hodap, maintenance section, during a Soviet airstrike. SS Untersturmführer Kriescher was lightly wounded. On July 20th, 9th Company continued its engagement near Kilbaski, supporting 3rd/SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike. During the battle, SS Untersturmführer Wenzel's previously damaged Tiger was permanently destroyed in Adamovice after a brief German counterattack enabled its retrieval. German forces poured fuel over the Tiger, igniting it to prevent Soviet capture. On July 21st, the 9th Company repelled a Soviet Su-85 self-propelled gun assault near Mankowiec, destroying several enemy vehicles. The Tigers then supported 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike in defending against Soviet attacks near Silvanovic, where heavy pressure was being applied to SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike's front line. The Soviet assault, advancing from Vasilievich Novosadi, resulted in 3 successive attacks against Totenkopf positions. 9th Company provided direct support, helping stabilize the situation. Between the evening of July 21st and the early hours of July 22nd, 9th Company, alongside 1st and 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike, launched a counter-offensive to re-establish the front line. While initially successful, the overall situation forced Totenkopf to eventually withdraw. By this time, Totenkopf had suffered significant losses in armour, personnel, and logistical support due to the sheer scale of Operation Bagrashion and the overwhelming Soviet offensives in Belarus and Poland. Despite their tactical victories in isolated engagements, the division was unable to prevent the collapse of Army Group Center, and Totenkopf's 9th Company and other armoured elements were gradually withdrawn from the front line for refitting. The battles of July 1944 marked one of the last major engagements of 9 Company's Tigers, before further redeployments and restructuring occurred in the following months. On July 23, 1944, SS Untersturmführer Neff reported to divisional headquarters to receive orders for 9th Company's redeployment from Army Group Center AOK-4 to Army Group North Ukraine AOK-2, with the unit being transferred by rail to the Citadel area. Despite these movement orders, 9th Company was still engaged in combat operations. On July 25th, 4 Tigers were sent to Osowiec for loading, but only 3 rail flat cars were available, forcing the 4th Tiger to remain behind until August 3rd before it could be transported. The Tiger arrived in Warsaw Praga on August 5th, while the 3 Tigers that had been loaded in Osowiec arrived in Sokolo in the evening. One of these Tigers reached Citadel at 1950, while the other 2 left Sokolo at 22:05. By July 26th, 5 Tigers remained in action 5 kilometers east of Dabrowa, attached to the 3rd Company of the SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike. These Tigers were finally released for transport on July 27th, ordered to move from Dabrowa to Zambaro. The transfer to Citadel began on July 28th, with the Werkstatt Company transport loading 2 damaged Tigers. SS Panzer Regiment Drey required 15 flat cars to transport all of its damaged tanks and Stug Drey assault guns, and the transport left Osowiec at 15:15 hours. On July 29th at 5:30 am, a rail transport carrying 5 Tigers was loaded in Osowiec and arrived in Sokolo at 17:25 on July 30th. Another 3 Tigers were loaded at 22:30 on July 30th, but due to combat conditions, this transport was rerouted from Sokolo to Warsaw, arriving at 23:15 on July 31st. Simultaneously, a transport carrying 5 brand new Tigers from HZA Magdeburg arrived in Warsaw Praga on July 31st. These new Tigers, under SS Hauptscharführer Berger's command, were ordered by SS Obersturmbannführer Wolf to proceed to the Staufer Kaserne. On July 24th, ISS Panzer Regiment 3 returned from refitting, equipped with 78 Panthers, including 5 Command Panthers under SS Sturmbannführer Meyerdress, a Knight's Cross and Oak Leaves recipient. Erich Lehmkuhl recalled the chaotic combat in Citadel. On July 18, 1944, the company, under its new commander SS Hauptsturmführer Fischer, was ordered to advance toward the Neman bridgehead. The village of Kilbaski was under attack from 3 sides by Soviet forces, and 9th Company had to secure it. During the engagement, SS Unterscharführer Schulz's Tiger suffered engine failure and was immobilized in the middle of the village, surrounded by burning houses. The company moved to rescue Schulz, attached tow cables to his Tiger, and attempted to retreat westward. Suddenly, enemy anti-tank fire struck from the front. The first shell hit Schulz's Tiger's main gun, forcing the crew to immediately close their hatches. SS Hauptsturmführer Fischer, however, was still exposed and was killed while trying to close his commander's hatch when another anti-tank round hit their Tiger. The driver, Sepp, fired a flare signal, prompting the SS Polizei Regiment anti-tank crew that had mistakenly fired on them to cease fire. The horrified anti-tank crew realized their error, but a well-trained gun commander should never have made such a mistake. A Tiger commander described the battle in Citadel on July 31st. Our Tiger turned on the spot and fired down the length of the street. On our right was a railway embankment and behind it the road to Chodo. The 8.8 centimeter cannon fired, filling the turret with smoke. We kept the hatches open to ventilate the fumes. Behind me, SS Unterscharführer Holtorf fired another round, hitting a 3rd Russian tank, which erupted in flames as the crew bailed out. As German forces withdrew from Citadel, the Panther Battalion and 9th Company retreated westward, then moved north toward Chodo, passing through Kopsi and assembling near Sukdol. On August 3rd, 2 Tigers supported ISS Panzer Regiment 3 near Banacho-Wisna, east of Nadbil, holding off an attack by the Soviet 3rd Tank Corps. The Panther Battalion launched a counterattack along the Kolno-Zambraniec Road, while 2 Tigers participated in a counterattack on Stawiska. On August 4th, 3 Tigers supported ISS Panzer Regiment 3 in battles near Okuniev, while 1 Panther company from ISS Panzer Regiment 3 assisted SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment Germania of 5th SS Panzer Division Wiking in engagements near Chobota and Mirowiarska. On August 5th, 9th Company engaged in defensive actions near Lesnogora, 25 kilometers east of Stanislawav, supporting 2nd and 3rd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eike. The company knocked out 3 T-34s, but 1 Tiger was severely damaged and required maintenance. Between August 6th and 7th, the company experienced a brief period of rest before being redeployed west of Gozdioka on August 8th. On August 19th, 9th Company and elements of ISS Panzer Regiment 3 launched counterattacks near Krusha, attempting to clear a Soviet anti-tank gun front east of Woloroschep. With support from 1st Company, they successfully breached enemy defences, though one Panther sustained damage to its main gun. Later that day, Soviet tanks were spotted in the woods 1.5 kilometers southeast of Krusha. 1st Company, 7 Panthers, and 9th Company, 4 Tigers, advanced across open terrain, but were ambushed by JS2 heavy tanks from the 62nd Heavy Guards Tank Regiment at a range of 1,000 meters. The JS2, based on the KV chassis and mounting a massive 12.2 centimeter main gun, proved deadly. One Panther was immediately destroyed, while another, commanded by SS Obersturmbannführer Schramm, suffered multiple hits to its track, wheels and hull, requiring emergency recovery. 2 Tigers were knocked out, trophy numbers 123 and 124, while a 3rd Tiger was abandoned by its crew due to extensive damage. The destroyed Tigers were commanded by SS Untersturmführer Neff, SS Unterscharführer Sandler, and SS Oberscharführer Weidner. Weidner was killed, along with SS Sturmann Schmidt, radio operator, and SS Sturmann Meyer, driver. In the afternoon, another counterattack was launched with better success. The Tigers knocked out one JS2 tank and immobilized 2 more, while tanks from SS Panzer Regiment 5 attacked Kozli, providing relief to SS Panzer Regiment 3 near Krusha. By the end of the day, the 4th SS Panzer Corps claimed 21 Soviet tanks and self-propelled guns destroyed 76 self-propelled gun, while another 9 Shermans and 2 Su-76 were damaged and needed repairs. Lemko later described the loss of SS Oberscharführer Weidner's Tiger. All his crew were killed. SS Untersturmführer Neff's Tiger was hit, sustaining severe damage, forcing the crew to bail out. The company carried out multiple counterattacks near Radzimin and Pustelnik, suffering additional Tiger losses. Loader Boxleitner was killed by friendly fire. The Russians constantly shelled us, making sleep nearly impossible. SS Obersturmbannführer Neidhart was surveying terrain when a grenade explosion wounded him and killed his dog. Neff took over the company, and Krisha was lightly wounded. The front line pulled back to Yosifov, where 9th Company supported an assault to retake Hill 104, facing relentless Soviet artillery barrages, marking another brutal chapter in Totenkov's defense of Poland. On August 2nd, 1944, the Tigers of 9th Company were engaged in combat northwest of Nadma, maneuvering through wooded terrain. Some Tigers in Warsaw crossed the Poniatowski Bridge, pushing the German front line further west. On August 13th, the Tiger of SS Unterscharführer Probst was destroyed by Soviet artillery on Hill 104, just 1 kilometer west of Slupno, resulting in Probst's death. Walter Weber of 5th Company recalled the fighting in Radzimin. In the afternoon, we occupied defensive positions at the outskirts of Radzimin. Ahead of us was a 2,000-meter strip leading to a wooded area where Russian tanks were amassing. We observed the movement of trees and bushes, listening to Soviet radio transmissions, though we could not understand them. In support of us were 3 Tigers from the Heavy Company. We pulled back deeper into the town, flanked by 2 Tigers that had already skirmished with JS2 heavy tanks. These Tigers eventually withdrew, and although we wanted to follow, a radio order forced us to hold our position. Then, Russian JS2 heavy tanks appeared. After losing Hill 104, the 9th Company and other Totenkopf divisional elements were ordered to retreat during the night of September 14th to 15th into defensive positions near Yosifov. On September 15th, 9th Company was reassigned to SS Panzerjäger Abteilung 3. The next day, the company, supported by grenadiers from 3rd/SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eicher and 2nd/SS Panzerjäger Abteilung 3, was sent to Rembelszczyzna and Tomaszów to assist Hungarian forces facing mounting Soviet pressure. On September 16th, Tigers and Totenkopf Grenadiers launched a counterattack on Hill 103, located 2 kilometers south of Rembelszczyzna. During this engagement, SS Untersturmführer Neff's Tiger was destroyed by Soviet artillery. Neff managed to bail out, but SS Rottenführer Kowalski, gunner, SS Sturmann Lucht, driver, and SS Sturmann Lau, radio operator, were all killed. In another skirmish, SS Sturmann Weber was killed by Soviet infantry fire. With Neff wounded, command of 9th Company was transferred to SS Untersturmführer Krischer, while Neff was sent to the divisional hospital. On September 17th and 18th, counterattacks were launched, but Soviet artillery and defensive lines inflicted heavy casualties. On September 19th, the 9th Company launched a partially successful assault on Hill 103, though on September 20th, a major Soviet offensive overwhelmed the German defences, leading to the loss of the hill. As Soviet forces advanced, the Tigers of 9th Company found themselves dangerously exposed, forcing them to manoeuvre strategically to avoid encirclement. By September 20th, 1944, the manpower strength of 9th Company stood at 2 officers, 25 NCOs, and 87 enlisted men, totaling 114 soldiers. On October 1st, the company had 2 officers, 25 NCOs, and 90 enlisted men, a total of 117 personnel, though 3 NCOs and 8 enlisted men were sick or wounded. At the start of October, the company constructed defensive bunkers in Legionovo, reinforcing positions with wooden beams for roofing. Support units were based in Jablona, while combat elements were positioned near Josefov. On October 10th, Tigers engaged in intense combat for Hill 101, west of Josefov, alongside the 2nd Battalion of the SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 Eiche. During the battle, SS Sturmmann Kautz, Cook, SS Rottenführer Koppen, gunner, and SS Oberscharführer Wendt, tank commander, were killed when their Tiger was destroyed. SS Rottenführer Preisendanz, truck driver, was seriously wounded and later died from his injuries on October 24th. These losses occurred near Jablona. Additionally, SS Kubelwagen driver Karl Schade, Christian Schurd, and company cook Leudold were wounded during the engagement. On October 11th, former 9th Company commander SS Sturmbannführer Biermeier was seriously wounded while commanding 2nd/SS Panzer Regiment 3. While visiting the command post of 2nd Company/SS Panzer Pioneer Battalion 3, he was hit by Soviet artillery fire. That same day, 6 Tigers disrupted a Soviet assault, though 4 of them sustained serious damage near Mikhailo Grabina. On October 12th, SS Untersturmführer Neff returned to command 9th Company, having recovered from his wounds. SS Untersturmführer Krischer was transferred to the Regimental Headquarters Company. Krischer later contracted pneumonia and was hospitalized on December 9th at the SS hospital in Modlin. On December 23rd, he was transferred to the SS Panzer Ausbildungs- und Ersatz Regiment in Sennelager, before being sent to Vienna for specialized treatment on February 7th, 1945. By late 1944, the 9th Company Tigers were heavily depleted, and the company, along with the entire Totenkopf division, was gradually pulled back for restructuring and reinforcement. The Eastern Front was collapsing, and the division prepared for its next deployment in Hungary, where it would participate in desperate battles to slow the Soviet advance toward Germany's borders. On October 12th to 13th, 1944, the Totenkopf Division's front line came under intense Soviet artillery bombardment, resulting in the deaths of SS Rottenführer Hodap in Legionovo and SS Sturmann Priess, both from the maintenance section near Jablona during a Soviet airstrike. On October 14th, the Tigers of 9th Company were engaged in defensive combat around Hill 97 and Lapigros, holding back enemy advances. The following day, on October 15th, SS Untersturmführer Neff was promoted to SS Obersturmführer in recognition of his leadership. That same day, Tigers attached to ISS Panzer Regiment 3 fought in battles near Josefov, successfully knocking out 6 Soviet tanks. 3 were claimed by the Panther Battalion and 3 by 9th Company. On October 16th, Soviet forces ceased all offensive operations, having failed to break through to the Vistula River. However, on October 19th, they launched another major assault, which was once again repelled by concentrated German defensive fire. By October 22nd, SS Panzer Regiment 3 regrouped in the area of Jablona Legionovo, with 9th Company consolidating its remaining strength, mustering a total of 13 operational Tigers. Elements of SS Panzerjägerabteilung 3 rejoined the company, while other elements of 9th Company remained attached to 1st SS Panzer Regiment 3, maintaining their role in mid-October combat operations. On October 26th, 5 new replacements joined the 9th Company, having been transferred from the Luftwaffe after re-enlisting into the Waffen-SS. Totenkopf received a large influx of replacements from the Luftwaffe, totaling 12 officers, 944 NCOs, and 3,360 enlisted men. Of these, 2,086 men were already assigned to divisional units, while 1,277 remained in training behind the front line, and 950 were stationed with SS Feld Ersatz Battalion 3. That same day, the Soviets launched another massive artillery barrage, pounding the Totenkopf Division's positions along the front. On October 27th, SS Panzer Regiment 3 was forced to withdraw across the Brodnowski Canal near Leysk to establish a new defensive line. The next day, on October 28th, Soviet forces captured Legionovo, forcing the division into further retreat. By October 31st, Soviet units attempted to seize Nowy Dwor, Bugmunde, but they were ambushed by well-camouflaged German anti-tank positions and Stug assault guns, leading to a bloody battle near the village of Derlax. After sustaining heavy losses, the Soviets were forced to retreat back to their starting positions following a successful counterattack by Totenkopf Grenadiers and Stugs. From November 5th, AOK-9 deployed ISS Panzer Regiment 3, consisting of 14 Panthers, along with I-GEP and 2 SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 5 Totenkopf as a reserve south of Modlin. By November 6th, SS Panzer Regiment 3 regrouped in Lomna Nimiki, preparing for further engagements. On November 8th, SS Untersturmführer Heinz Westerling joined 9th Company as a platoon leader, having recently completed the 3rd SS Panzer Junker Sonderlehrgang in Falling-Bostel. He had enlisted in the Waffen-SS on May 15, 1942, and was promoted to SS Untersturmführer on October 20, 1944. Meanwhile, ISS Panzer Regiment 3 remained south of Modlin on November 12, fielding 12 operational Panthers, and operating alongside ISS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 5 Totenkopf Gepi, continuing their role as AOK-9's reserve force. Throughout October and November 1944, 9th Company and SS Panzer Regiment 3 found themselves in continuous combat, facing relentless Soviet offensives while attempting to hold defensive lines near the Vistula River. The barrage of Soviet artillery, overwhelming infantry assaults, and tank battles in Poland significantly weakened the division, yet Totenkopf and its Tiger Battalion continued to resist, inflicting heavy casualties before eventually being withdrawn for refitting and further deployments. In 1943, the Soviet First Ukrainian Front had broken through German lines and advanced toward the city of Zhytomyr. In response, the German High Command ordered the 48th Panzer Corps to strike the Soviet flank, aiming to prevent the Red Army from gaining access to the more favourable road networks south of the Pripet marshes. Although the counterattack did not completely shatter the enemy forces, it did halt their momentum. The Soviets had positioned their 60th Army northeast of Zhytomyr, threatening to exploit a gap north of the town. To counter this, German command issued new orders to the 48th Panzer Corps. They were to launch a surprise offensive against Soviet units operating between the Teterev River and the Zhytomyr to Korostan highway. These Soviet elements were directly engaging the German 13th Army Corps. A successful strike could enable the German 13th Corps to maneuver along the Teterev River and link up with the 59th Army Corps positioned further north. However, the assault zone remained largely unreconnoitred. For this reason, the 48th Panzer Corps initially resisted the order, citing the inability to camouflage reconnaissance efforts and the fact that all bridges between Zhytomyr and Korostan had been destroyed. Nevertheless, preparations went ahead. On the 2nd of December, units of the Leibstandarte arrived in the Zhytomyr area and spread out northward. They spent the next 3 days improving combat readiness while conducting secret reconnaissance inside the city streets. To mislead the Soviets, a decoy force composed of supply and baggage units was sent southeast, towards Zhytomyr. Meanwhile, 3 panzer divisions, moving only under the cover of darkness, proceeded toward their assembly areas near Charnyakov. Their plan was to strike eastward across the Zhytomyr-Korostan highway. The 7th Panzer Division moved toward Voldarsk. The 1st Panzer Division took positions in Fedorovka. The Leibstandarte headed for the village of Selyanshchina. SS Major Joachim Piper prepared for the upcoming battle with careful precision. He formed his armoured battle group, which included his main tank regiment, the Armoured Personnel Carrier Battalion, a reinforced reconnaissance unit under SS Major Knittel, the No. 2 Pioneer Company under SS 2nd Lieutenant Fellhauer, and the 5th Anti-Aircraft Battery. As of December 4th, Piper had operational control over 4 Panzer Mark III tanks, 30 Panzer Mark IV tanks, 28 Panther tanks, and 4 Tiger tanks. A significant number of other vehicles were undergoing repairs or maintenance. The 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment was assigned to follow Piper's group, with the mission to capture the towns of Koroshevka and Torchin. In the words of SS Colonel Wish, the attack plan was as follows. On December 5th, at 1500 hours, Panzer Group Piper was to begin movement. They would detour around the Soviet-held town of Chernyakov by night, then swing north and advance on a wide front through the village of Andreev and the high ground near the settlement of Stirti. Piper's forces were to push eastward toward the town of Radomyshl, ignoring any threats to their flanks. At 2000 hours, or 8 in the evening on December 5th, Panzer Group Piper reached the village of Selyanshchina. However, enemy positions were soon identified west of the village of Pekarshchina. Soviet troops were entrenched in an extensive trench network and had established a circular defensive perimeter around the village. The surrounding terrain made it impossible to bypass the area, and it was crucial for the Germans to capture the bridges intact. Piper took personal command of the Armoured Personnel Carrier Battalion and launched a bold night assault. Leading from the front inside Captain Gould's armoured carrier, Piper's men advanced with ferocious speed. Machine guns and flamethrowers blazed in the night as the Soviet defenders were caught off guard. The trench lines were overrun and the village was set ablaze. Soviet forces were annihilated in the trenches and inside the village. SS Captain Gould had recognized the strategic importance of the 50-ton bridge within the village. After a brief discussion, he ordered his battalion to attack at moonrise. Charging into Pekarshchina under heavy machine gun and anti-tank fire, Gould's men cleared 3 trench lines in front of the village, then advanced into its heart. The enemy was overwhelmed by fire and flame. Gould's unit captured the eastern part of the village, secured the bridge intact, and established a bridgehead. During the fighting, Gould's armoured vehicle was struck by light anti-tank fire. He sustained a severe head injury and lost an eye. Second Lieutenant Gurs, who was beside him in the same vehicle, later recalled that Gould had spotted the Soviet gun by its muzzle flash. They had no time to evade. After applying emergency treatment to Gould's wound, Gurs ordered the driver to return to the aid station. He then ran across the battlefield to report directly to Piper, who was 50 meters away in another carrier. Command of the battalion passed to Captain Dinse, and Gurs joined him in his vehicle. On December 6th, at dawn, Piper led a reconnaissance mission toward Andreev. His forces overran and destroyed an anti-tank battery, capturing the town by 0600 hours. They quickly blocked the Chernyakov to Korostin road, a critical supply route. East of Andreev, Piper's group destroyed several more artillery batteries and anti-tank strongpoints. By nightfall, they had seized the high ground on either side of the village of Stirti, achieving the day's objectives. The momentum did not stop there. Piper's panzer group surged forward, smashing enemy positions in a rapid advance. They captured the command post of the 121st Rifle Division in Kiselevka, overran the 322nd Division at Seltishi, routed the 148th Division in Kameny Brid, and struck the 336th Division in Katanovka. The unit then paused to refuel. During this phase, Piper's group destroyed or captured 22 field guns, 76 medium anti-tank guns of 76mm, 38 light anti-tank guns, 49 machine guns, 40 motor vehicles, 71 horse-drawn carts, and killed approximately 1,450 enemy troops. Despite the difficult terrain and lack of roads, they had advanced 30 kilometers deep into enemy territory. Their strike destabilized the entire Soviet front in the region and allowed the German 13th Army Corps to advance unimpeded. By 1630 hours on December 6th, Piper's Panzer Regiment and the reconnaissance detachment reached the village of Chalkovka via Torchin. However, Soviet forces had temporarily severed the supply route. It wasn't until the afternoon of December 7th that the main body was able to proceed to Tchaikovka. There, Piper encountered significant Soviet anti-tank defences. To avoid unnecessary losses, he delayed movement until nightfall, then manoeuvred his group northward to outflank the Soviet position. By 1900 hours, Piper's forces had broken through again, striking eastward for 10 kilometers. They turned north to seize Chodori and advanced into the heavily fortified village of Sabolot. After savage house-to-house fighting, the Germans took the village by 1000 hours. During this night assault, Piper's men destroyed 1 T-34 tank, 8 field guns, 1 45mm anti-tank gun, 61 76mm anti-tank guns, 21 light anti-tank weapons, 55 machine guns, and 5 supply trucks. 930 Soviet soldiers were killed and 3 taken prisoner. This bold maneuver, conducted far behind enemy lines, ruptured the Soviet defensive belt and prevented the Red Army from establishing a crossing over the Teterev River. Colonel Wish praised Piper's leadership, crediting his audacity, swift tactical decisions, and personal bravery for the division's success. Between November 21st and December 24th, under Piper's command, the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment had destroyed 100 T-34 tanks, 11 field guns, 124 76mm anti-tank weapons, 24 light anti-tank guns, 16 trucks, 14 artillery tractors, 7 anti-aircraft guns, and 2 Ilyushin Il-2 aircraft. Piper was awarded the Oak Leaves to his Knight's Cross on December 27, 1943. On the 9th of December, Piper's armoured group, now reinforced by the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, launched another assault. This time, their objective was the village of Meshcherishka. The advance began in the late evening, around 1930 hours, after heavy Soviet resistance was reported in the area. Despite fierce opposition, Piper's units pushed through and secured the village. Forward elements even managed to reach the Teterev River. For his part in the fighting at Meshcherishka, one soldier recorded being awarded his 46th confirmed close combat day. The loader of SS, Captain Kling's Tiger tank, later recounted this mission in detail. He described how Piper, after taking command of the Panzer Regiment following Colonel Schoenberger's death, had become one of the most respected and aggressive leaders in the entire division. His fearlessness, especially during night operations, gave his men a sense of security even during the most dangerous tasks. During the December campaign near the town of Radomyshl, Piper's armoured group consisted of 4 to 5 Tiger tanks, a number of Panzer Mark IV tanks, several self-propelled guns, armoured personnel carriers and amphibious vehicles. They advanced along what the Germans called a Rollbahn, an unpaved supply road bulldozed to a width of 50 metres. In dry weather, these routes were like bowling alleys. In the cold mud of December, they became bottomless quagmires. Leading the column were 2 or 3 Tiger tanks under the command of 2nd Lieutenant Wendorf, escorted by reconnaissance carriers. The column moved 20 kilometers behind enemy lines through a forested area, carefully sneaking along the horizon to avoid detection. By the evening of the second day, they had made contact with friendly German lines once again. The soldier recounting this episode was riding as a loader in Captain Kling's Tiger tank, which was positioned in the center of the formation. Just behind them, Major Piper was riding in a heavy cross-country staff car. He sat on the mudguard, cradling a submachine gun, issuing orders as the group moved. The forest roads were heavily mined. The mines resembled wooden fish crates filled with a yellow explosive and were masterfully camouflaged. At least 3 of the lead Tiger tanks struck mines. Their tracks and suspension systems were destroyed, immobilizing them deep in enemy territory. These stranded vehicles were guarded by armored carriers and panzer grenadiers. The narrator recalled feeling incredibly lucky not to be among the crews stuck 20 kilometers behind enemy lines. As night fell, the soldiers grew increasingly anxious. Piper ordered the group to form a hedgehog, an all-around defensive position. The immobilized Tiger commanded by SS Corporal Molly, Piper's car, and Kling's tank formed the core of the formation. The rest of the battle group arranged themselves in a 100-meter radius, prepared for a night of constant skirmishing. Throughout the night, Soviet reconnaissance parties probed the German defences. Gunfire erupted sporadically, yet Piper and Captain Kling remained calm, projecting confidence that steadied the men around them. The Soviets, confused by the all-around defence, were unable to determine where the German front lines began or ended. One chilling anecdote from the night came from Grenadier Wenzel, whose Tiger had been disabled by a mine. In search of food, his crew entered a hut, only to come face to face with a Soviet soldier, apparently on the same mission. Both sides were so startled that the Red Army man dropped his utensils and fled, allowing the unarmed German crew to escape. By midday the following day, the battle group had to push through the Soviet lines from behind. Only Captain Kling's Tiger remained operational. In one intense moment, his crew spotted an anti-tank gun near a shack. As they tried to line up a shot, they took a direct hit to the barrel. Fortunately, the crew did not fire. The impact had damaged the barrel internally. Had they shot, the shell would have exploded inside the gun, killing them instantly. Piper, positioned just behind them, ordered a nearby reconnaissance team to neutralize the threat. What followed was a brutal close-quarters assault. The reconnaissance soldiers threw grenades and stormed the anti-tank position, wiping out the crew. Later that afternoon, the group finally reached friendly lines and collapsed in exhaustion inside a captured Soviet hut. But their work wasn't done. SS officer Wendorf, known affectionately as Booby, went from tank to tank gathering volunteers to return and recover the immobilized Tigers. Aboard a 3-ton towing tractor filled with spare track parts, ammunition and food, they returned to the damaged tanks. With help from the Panzer Grenadiers who had since secured the forward positions, the stranded Tigers were made mobile again. These acts of loyalty and camaraderie were a testament to the bond between the men and the extraordinary leadership of officers like Piper and Wendorf. The next operation began on the 10th of December. The Panzer Group launched an attack from Meshcherishka toward the village of Krasnoborki. However, the assault was met with devastating anti-tank fire from the eastern approaches. Several German tanks were knocked out. The Armoured Personnel Carrier Battalion engaged in brutal close-range combat while trying to seize control of Hill 154.2. Despite the resistance, the Panzer Group regrouped. On the 11th of December, they renewed the attack on Krasnoborki and the neighbouring village of Weliki Racha. According to the war diary of the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, the plan was precise. The entire regiment would form up in gullies 2.5 kilometers west of Meshcherishka. The 1st and 2nd battalions would advance side by side. On the right flank, the assault guns known as grills would support the 1st battalion. The Panzer Regiment would support the 2nd battalion on the left. The 3rd battalion would follow behind. After a 10-minute artillery bombardment, the attack would begin. The objective was to quickly seize the eastern end of Krasnoborki, then cross the bridge with tanks and assault guns. After regrouping, they would move on Hill 170.2, then proceed to breach Weliki Racha from the north, using the stream to flank the village. At midday, the operation commenced. The Germans captured Krasnoborki and took control of the ridge at Hill 170.2. Soviet tanks were waiting near Weliki Racha, but the Germans fought on the 12th of December. The same soldier received his 48th confirmed close combat day. However, the momentum slowed. The next objective, Chudin, remained in Soviet hands. The Red Army had deployed heavy artillery along the elevated eastern banks of the Taterev River, halting any further German advances for the time being. Among the soldiers who fought under him, Jochen Piper stood as more than just a battlefield commander. SS 2nd Lieutenant Gerd Jahn, a platoon leader in the 2nd Panzer Company equipped with Panthers under SS Lieutenant Hans Malkomes, described Piper not only as one of the most capable panzer leaders in the entire Wehrmacht, but also as a man whose brilliance extended far beyond military strategy. His high decorations were well deserved, Jahn recalled, but what impressed us more was his intellect, his clarity, and his humanity. Piper wasn't a reckless daredevil driven by glory. He was a strategist who planned with precision, balanced aggression with caution, and never underestimated the enemy. His leadership inspired great respect among his men, calm, modest, and clear-headed amidst chaos. By mid-December 1943, the Leibstandartes 3rd Battalion, under the command of SS Lieutenant Otto Dinser, had been reinforced with a lone Tiger tank and 5 grills. At approximately 14:30 on the 12th of December, they launched a direct assault on the village of Badyalovka. Their objective, reach the banks of the Taterev River and destroy a key bridge to disrupt Soviet movement. The assault was fierce. Armoured personnel carriers and grills smashed through the village's outer defences and pushed forward, but as they emerged beyond the village, the German advance was met by a curtain of fire from concealed Soviet anti-tank positions and artillery batteries situated on the far bank of the river. The onslaught was so intense that further progress became impossible. The Panzer Group withdrew to the western edge of Badyalovka as the rest of the regiment held the village of Sabolot under constant pressure. That same day, SS Lieutenant Colonel Krass, commander of the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, wrote a letter to his wife amid the bitter struggle. "We've now fought 5 days and nights without pause. The combat is unimaginably fierce, and I fear it will soon break us." The regiment's war diary painted a grim picture. Men were physically and mentally exhausted, driven to near apathy by the constant strain. Yet despite the suffering, the fighting intensified. The Soviet objective was clear: to seize the Teterev-Irsha River Delta, secure the Kiev-Korostan Railway, and carve out a staging ground for a larger offensive. Every bridgehead the Germans held across those rivers became a crucial defensive bulwark. On 14th December, at precisely 11:30, Piper's Panzer Group attacked again, this time targeting the village of Iskra. They succeeded in capturing the settlement, then pressed toward the Veprin-Fedorovka highway. Swinging westward, they maneuvered along the bed of a shallow stream toward a fork in the road just a kilometer south of eastern Fedorovka. It was there that 2 German panzers were lost in exchange for 3 destroyed Soviet T-34s. With no viable way to recross the stream, Peiper aimed to push through at Fedorovka East. For his actions in the savage close-quarters fighting that day, Peiper was awarded his 50th confirmed close combat day. Later that night, under orders from Corps Command, Peiper's group withdrew towards Sabolot-Chodori. Plans were already in motion for a renewed armoured offensive southwest of Korostan. German divisions prepared to confront the Soviets near Malin. The Leibstandarte repositioned west of Meleni, while the 1st Panzer Division shifted to support. On 18 December, high-ranking officers met to finalize the attack on Chepovici, their objective, the strategic Malin-Korostan road. At 10:43 on the 19th of December, Peiper led his Panzer regiment into battle. 33 Panzer IVs, 12 Panthers, and 7 Tigers thundered forward. The spearhead of the assault was formed by 13 self-propelled guns and 5 10.5 centimeter howitzers. Peiper's unit attacked in coordination with the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, while the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, backed by armoured personnel carriers, aimed to seize the area northwest of Sovchozy for a further thrust southeast. The double-pronged assault tore through Soviet positions. By 13:35, the lead elements had pushed west of Sovchoza. At 15:20, following heavy fighting and a tank engagement at Stremigorod, where 2 T-34s were knocked out, Peiper's forces captured Balyarka Station. Virtually the entire 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment became entangled in brutal house-to-house combat at Balyarka. By 18:30, the vanguard pushed into Peremoga, but an entrenched Soviet anti-tank front 1.5 kilometers east brought them to a halt. Peiper was awarded his 52nd close combat day for the savage hand-to-hand fighting there. The rapid advance alarmed Soviet commanders. Intelligence from the German 48th Corps stated that Peiper's drive had put Soviet forces in the Chepovici-Meleni sector at risk of encirclement. Colonel von Mellenthin, Chief of Staff of the Corps, praised the cohesion and ferocity of the combined German panzer divisions, calling them, undoubtedly, the finest divisions Germany had. Among the many surreal and deadly moments of this campaign, one stood out. During the battle for a village, SS Lieutenant Otto Dintz burst into a house and came face to face with a tall Russian officer. Both froze. Instead of reaching for their weapons, they locked eyes. In a moment of mutual respect, the Russian saluted. Dintz returned the gesture, turned and walked away. Neither man fired a shot. By the morning of the 20th of December, the Leibstandarte panzers had been forced to fall back 400 meters from Chepovici. Soviet resistance was mounting. At 14:45, Peiper's panzers resumed their assault on the railway line. The battle raged until 1800 hours, when the Germans finally broke through with the help of the Bradl battle group. For this hard-won success, Peiper received his 53rd close combat day. However, Soviet anti-tank fire intensified, forcing the APC battalion to retreat. By 1930, they had regrouped at the railway-level crossing and secured positions to the east and north. A war correspondent embedded with the unit described the attack vividly. As darkness fell, muzzle flashes from enemy anti-tank guns lit up the landscape like bursts of flame from the earth itself. Soviet infantry darted through shadows and alleys. One shell blast tore open a hut, sending its roof flying skyward like a straw-coloured wig ripped from a bald head. Flames erupted and the structure burned like a torch. In the chaos, Peiper's command tank surged down a flaming street, seeking cover in darkness. Ahead, a T-34 exploded in a fireball. A second tank vanished behind it in a rain of metal shards. The 2nd Battalion of the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment entered Chepovici from the west, fighting yard by yard under anti-tank, mortar and tank fire. Reinforcements arrived at 23:30 and linked up with Peiper's panzers at the railway embankment 2 kilometers east of the station. However, Soviet resistance was unrelenting. 17 T-34s, 4 self-propelled guns and 44 artillery pieces were destroyed that day alone. What followed was one of the most devastating ambushes of the campaign. Peiper and his men had set up at the railway embankment to refuel during the night. Unexpectedly, Soviet tanks began arriving on the opposite side, unaware of the German presence. Recognizing the opportunity, Peiper ordered an immediate surprise attack. SS Corporal Hans Ahrens and his fellow tankers opened fire from concealed positions. Broadside after broadside, the German shells tore through the Soviet armor. In just minutes, 32 tanks were destroyed. None returned fire, but the victory was not without cost. Soviet snipers retaliated from elevated positions, targeting the exposed Germans. At least 25 men were shot in the head. The unit suffered heavy casualties despite their earlier success. As the battle dragged on into 21st December, the APC battalion fended off wave after wave of Soviet counterattacks. Mortars and tanks harassed every supply route. At 10:50, the Bormann battle group reported intense fighting from all sides. At 7 a.m, SS Grenadier Wolfgang Günther destroyed a Soviet tank in close combat. Other units destroyed additional T-34s during the day, but losses mounted. By 13:30, Peiper withdrew his Panzer Regiment from the embankment due to punishing artillery fire. SS 2nd Lieutenant Goers recalled Dinz being hit just meters away, only for the bullet to be stopped by his greatcoat. Goers' company, which had arrived with 60 men and 8 armoured vehicles, left with only 7 men unscathed. 17 had fallen and 36 were wounded, including Goers himself, who had taken 3 wounds in one day. The cost was staggering, but so was the success. On 21st December alone, the Leibstandarte destroyed 23 T-34s and 2 anti-tank guns. The Soviet plan to break out of the Chepovici-Meleni region and strike Zhytomyr had been crushed. For Peiper, this marked his 54th close combat day, earned during a firefight at Ossifovka. By Christmas of 1943, the men of the Leibstandarte had been in nearly continuous combat for weeks on end. Their strength was waning, their ranks thinned, but they still had one more major operation ahead of them. The division, alongside the 1st Panzer Division, was transferred within the 14th Panzer Corps to a new sector south of Zhytomyr. The Soviets had begun massing their forces east of the city and were preparing a fresh offensive. By Boxing Day, 26 December, the Leibstandarte reached the new front line, with the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment holding the stretch from Volza to Stepok. From there, they began reconnaissance operations toward Popelnya. That same day, a lone Soviet T-34 attempted to breach the line near Volza. It carried a squad of infantry on its hull, aiming to break through and sow chaos. But a young SS Grenadier named Willy Pfeiffer from the 2nd Platoon of No. 14 Company reacted with decisive aggression. Using handheld charges, he destroyed the tank in close quarters combat. His courage earned him not only special leave, but the rare and coveted Tank Destruction Badge. He would be formally awarded the honour months later, on May 5, 1944. The new year dawned cold and grey. On the morning of the 2nd of January 1944, at precisely 10:40, the APC battalion, supported by a detail of Panthers, faced another Soviet attack, this time from the north against the village of Gorodishche. 2 T-34s were destroyed in the opening exchange, but what followed was a brutal, grinding melee. The entire battalion became locked in close combat across the fields and houses of Rudnaya Gorodishche. Every building became a fortress, every hedgerow a killing zone. During the action, commanders from both No. 11 Company and the 3rd Battalion, SS Lieutenants Schmidt and Dinz, were wounded in the fierce struggle. On 14th January, after weeks in recovery, I finally rejoined my company. I had endured 10 weeks of non-stop fighting, including 6 weeks of relentless offensive operations followed by 4 weeks of hard defensive combat. The fact that the Eastern Front had not collapsed, that Army Group South had not been surrounded and destroyed, was due in no small part to the Leibstandarte. By this stage, however, the division was severely weakened. The once proud APC battalion was now a mere shadow of its former self, and command passed to SS 2nd Lieutenant Heinz Tomhart. Just days later, the Leibstandarte was once again on the move. On 22nd January 1944, it was reattached to the 14th Panzer Corps and ordered north toward Vinnitsa. 2 days later, on the 24th, the unit launched a renewed assault south of Rotmistrivka, linking up with the elite Panzer Regiment Bake. Rain turned the roads to rivers of mud, and progress was excruciatingly slow. During the intense combat that followed, the Leibstandarte engaged in close quarters fighting in and around Yanovka. On 29th January, the village of Morosovka was captured after yet another bloody engagement. Between 25th and 29th January alone, during the drive led by Battle Group Kuhlmann, the division destroyed a staggering 116 Soviet tanks, 89 anti-tank guns, and 11 field artillery pieces. For his leadership and bravery in these actions, Jochen Peiper was awarded the Oak Leaves to his Knight's Cross on 27th January. Just days later, on 30th January, SS Captain Paul Goul was awarded the German Cross in Gold. Despite having lost an eye during the fighting on 5th December, he returned to duty after convalescence in Berlin, now fitted with a glass eye. On the 2nd of March, he resumed command of the APC battalion. As for me, my own combat achievements during this critical week earned me further recognition. I was credited with 4 more confirmed close combat days, the 55th through the 58th, awarded for my role at Rotmistrivka on the 25th, Janovka on the 26th, Rososhi on the 27th, and Morosovka on the 28th, 29th of January. But despite these temporary gains, the cost was enormous. The Leibstandarte's own bulletin on 7th February painted a grim picture. The APC battalion was so depleted that it could now only function as infantry. It had virtually no armoured vehicles left. Its available weaponry had been reduced to just 2 light machine guns, 1 submachine gun, 5 pistols and 4 rifles. A pitiful armoury for a unit that had once spearheaded some of the most powerful offensives on the Eastern Front. Still, the battered survivors were not finished. By mid-February, under the command of SS Lieutenant Georg Preuss, the remains of the battalion were ordered to support the desperate Cherkasy operation. They left by night, slogging through torrential rain and thick mud. Only 6 panzers remained with the unit. By morning, 2 had already been lost. The roads had become swamps, tracks snapped, wheels jammed, vehicles sank into the mire. Lorries and even Tigers were seen bogged down and abandoned along the route. SS Grenadier Gert Quarthammer of No. 13 Company would later write of the march, describing it as real bad luck, where even mechanical parts seemed to betray them. A track came apart 8 times in just 3 hours. By the 9th of March 1944, the APC battalion, now officially reduced to the strength of a mere battle group, consisted of only 1 officer, 4 non-commissioned officers and 17 men, fewer than a full platoon. And yet, from 5th to 13th March, I earned 6 more close combat days. At Basalta, Kupel, Monachin, Losova, Wojtowski, and Svaljik, raising my total to 64. Then came the chaos of the Hube Pocket. By 23rd March 1944, the Leibstandarte found itself encircled with the 1st Panzer Army. Soviet forces closed in from all directions. Those elements of the APC battalion that were not surrounded remained stationed in Vinitsa, where SS 2nd Lieutenant Gers took over training duties for the next generation of grenadiers. On 25th March, I reached Proskurov, now little more than a burned and battered shell of a town. We abandoned it the next day. I rode out on the last vehicle, a motorcycle with sidecar, and rejoined my company, now under SS Sergeant Hafestro, at Stanislau. Hafestro assigned me to an NCO training course in Debica. Meanwhile, SS 2nd Lieutenant von Bergmann was sent to Tarnopol to take charge of 2 remaining grills. Upon arrival, he discovered 4 additional grills still loaded on a transport train. Seizing the opportunity, he took all 6, ensuring the company would be fully equipped again by the time they regrouped in Flanders. Despite being reduced to what the soldiers grimly called the last sweepings, the exhausted remnants of the Leibstandarte continued to fight rearguard actions during the chaotic retreat. After 5 months of constant battle, their ordeal finally came to an end. On the 14th of April 1944, the last battle group of the division was relieved. The shattered survivors were loaded onto trains and sent to Belgium to rest, refit and rebuild, for the war and their fight was far from over. After months of hell on the Eastern Front, the battered survivors of the Leibstandarte's armoured personnel carrier battalion boarded a train. Their bodies were broken, their nerves frayed, and the frost-bitten memories of Russia clung to them like a second skin. But now, for the first time in months, the endless howl of artillery faded into the distance. They were being sent west, to Flanders. Their destination was the quiet Flemish countryside, far from the scorched earth of Ukraine. The battalion, now under the steady command of SS Captain Paul Goul, found billets scattered around the region. Brie would serve as the centre of this temporary peace. Company 11 was quartered in Opeta. Company 12 settled in Gardingen, humorously renamed Preussingen by the men after their commander. Company 13 was stationed at Groot Road, and my own unit, Company 14, took root in the heart of Brie itself. The transition was jarring. One moment, we were clawing through snow-covered trenches, praying to survive the next hour. The next, we stood in quiet villages where children played in cobbled streets. and the sound of birds replaced the thunder of tank fire. But this was no holiday. From the moment we arrived, reorganization began. New recruits trickled in. Wounded veterans returned from hospitals, limping but ready. Officers were shuffled, transfers approved. And every man, whether green or battle-hardened, was thrown into intensive training. The Eastern Front had turned us into survivors. Now we had to become soldiers again. At the time, I was still enrolled in an NCO training course in Lommel. But on the 10th of May 1944, I was called back to Brie. 2 Grill assault guns had just arrived, and part of the battalion had assembled for a parade in the village marketplace. It was here, under the Flemish sky, that SS Captain Gould stepped forward and began distributing medals. The Iron Cross First Class was pinned to the chests of men who had proven themselves under fire. I was one of them. I had been informed of the award months earlier while still on the Russian front. But now, standing in formation in a quiet European village, I finally received it from Gould himself, the same man who had bled beside us in the snow and had led with one eye and unbreakable resolve. Others decorated that day included SS Lieutenant Heinz Tomhart of Company 13, SS Corporal Rudi Knobloch of Company 12, and Rudi Schwambach of my own company, one of the bravest flamethrower operators I had ever known. After the ceremony, we gathered at a small Belgian tavern to celebrate, veterans of Kharkov, Kiev and the Teterev River, now laughing over warm drinks and distant memories. At one point, someone knocked over a glass of wine, staining SS Lieutenant Georg Preuss's breeches. Without missing a beat, the infamous daredevil stripped off his trousers and carried on with the party in his underpants. No one thought it odd. In our world, death and survival blurred the lines between officer and enlisted man. What held us together wasn't rank, it was brotherhood. Despite the laughter, training was grueling. Fuel shortages meant we couldn't run full-scale drills with the Panzer Regiment. Still, we pushed on. New armoured personnel carriers, SDKFZ, 251 ships fitted with MG-42s began arriving. Companies 11 through 13 were re-equipped. Heavy platoons received mortars and light machine guns. Our own Company 14 operated 6 grills, lumbering self-propelled guns that had seen brutal service in the East. When the Normandy invasion began, our grills were reassigned to the Regimental Infantry Gun Company, where they'd face the Allies soon enough. Around this time, rumours spread like wildfire. A secret Waffen-SS paratroop battalion had been formed, and it was now accepting volunteers. One night, our company sergeant major, Fuchs, read out the official order. Within minutes, nearly every non-commissioned officer in the company had volunteered, including myself. The allure was undeniable, a chance to be part of something elite, airborne and new. But our company commander, SS Captain Dintz, put his foot down. He knew the storm was coming and refused to let his hardened NCOs abandon the men who would need them most. Then, on the 4th of June 1944, just days before the world changed on the beaches of Normandy, our commander Paul Gould was awarded the Knight's Cross. The man had led us from the front in Russia, taken a bullet to the head, and lost an eye. Yet here he was, back again, unshaken. The very next day, I received the Silver Close Combat Clasp for more than 30 confirmed engagements. In truth, I had already surpassed 60, but the Silver Clasp alone placed me among an elite group of just 36 men in our battalion. Other recipients included Flamethrower APC Commander Rudi Schwambach, Grill Commander Rudi Reyer, Albert Kruger, and pioneer veterans like Max Schmal and Georg Ermler, names etched into my memory, names I would one day mourn. On the 6th of June, D-Day, I was awarded the Gold Wound Badge, 6 wounds in action, and still I stood. I wore it proudly, alongside the Iron Cross First Class, the Silver Close Combat Clasp, the Bronze Infantry Assault Badge, and the Ostmedaille. I remained a Rottenführer, just a leading grenadier. I hadn't completed my NCO course, but experience speaks louder than stripes, and by then, I was one of the most seasoned men in my company, a foundation upon which others leaned. We were the spine of the front line, the ones who had seen everything, survived everything, and returned to fight again. Around that time, group leaders and APC commanders were issued close combat daggers, short blades meant for when the fight got personal. I wore mine tucked behind my belt on the right side. My kit included an MG-42, a submachine gun, a bolt-action carbine, and a pistol. We didn't carry fancy automatic rifles. We carried what worked. The battalion went through a final restructuring. On 16th June 1944, company numbers were changed. What was once 11 through 14 became 9 through 12. My Company 14 was now officially Company 12th. Commanders were reshuffled. SS Lieutenants Hans Schmidt, Georg Preuss and Gerd Babik took command of Companies 9, 10 and 11. SS Captain Dinzer remained our leader in the newly named Company 12. SS Captain Siegfried Wandt oversaw our supply lines. Gers became Ghoul's adjutant, and the men waited, trained, watched the skies. And then there was Piper. Jochen Piper, the man who had become a legend among us, returned to train and command the Panzer Regiment. Charismatic, demanding and unflinchingly disciplined, Piper inspired something different in the men: respect, reverence, a certain fear. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a symbol. SS Second Lieutenant Stiller of Panzer Company 7 once said that Piper was the most cultured man in the division, not just intelligent but insightful, someone who could sit and discuss the deeper things, someone who demanded that his officers carry themselves with dignity. He loathed drunken foolishness, disdained gentlemen's evenings, and had no tolerance for sloppiness. During one evening at the end of a training course in Hasselt, the NCO Corps decided to host a small party. Music, dancers, wine, something to lift the spirits. As the night wore on, the mood grew loud, unrestrained. Suddenly, the curtain pulled back. An officer, highly decorated, stepped out wearing a dancer's costume and began to perform. Laughter filled the room. Applause roared. Piper didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He simply stared, lips drawn tight. The next morning, the dancer was on report, confined to quarters, ordered to write a full report. Piper demanded discipline. Even in peacetime, he was preparing us for war. And the war was already knocking on the door.